Welcome to episode 21 of Sullivan Street, where we are going to get into the Crow's third studio album, This Desert Life, and a real fan favorite among many hardcore Crows fans. We'll get into that in a bit. But first, I will say hi to my co-host, Chris Miggs, who has not yet missed an episode with me. So thanks, Chris. Here we are.
Oh, we're here. We're always here together. Yeah, we got to keep doing this together. A band favorite too. I mean, the band loves playing this record. Over the years, it's kind of interesting. Kind of as we were talking to David Lowery. He's like, do they play this? He's like, pretty much this entire record still gets played, so they must like it too.
No, you're right. He said, I think he said during one of the live shows I was at that, or maybe it was, it was an interview when he was promoting one of the tours, and he said he has no interest in doing another like all August tour, but he said he goes, I'll never do it, but if I ever did a tour we just play one album front to back, it would actually be This Desert Life, because he said we really enjoy playing those songs live. So speaking of trivia about the band and how they might feel about This Desert Life or any other background information about the album, we had to bring in our historian, Geoff Harkness. Geoff, how are you doing?
Very good. Thanks for having me back. Always fun to be here and sit in. And this album, I think especially, is just so special for the real Counting Crows fan. Like if you're a Counting Crows fan in 2024, this is a really special album to you, and you probably know it and love it. So I'm really excited to talk about this album in particular, as much as I love the band's catalog. And actually, this is not my favorite Counting Crows album. It's so great. I mean, it's a 10 out of 10. I absolutely love this album, and I'm super excited to just talk to everybody else about it today.
Cool. Geoff's ready to follow them around on that hypothetical This Desert Life tour. He's given up the rest of his life. Right. He's driving around in a camper van, and he's just all over the country.
I'm with it. Yeah. Well, actually, it's the first time I saw them was on This Desert Life on this tour about, 2 or 3 weeks after the album was released. And then I saw them 2 other times within a few months of that. And I think that really this period solidified my fandom in a big way. I actually realized I saw them play every song from the album between those 3 shows, which is fun.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, we will definitely talk about that. And we also have 2 first-time guests, 2 fans of the podcast, dare I say, or maybe not fans of the podcast, but fans of Counting Crows and fans of This Desert Life, and both wrote me and said, hey, I really want to be on this album. First, we will say hi to Sara. And then Sara, just say hi. And since your first time on the podcast, maybe talk about how you became a big Crows fan and what keeps you with the band today.
Okay. Hi, I'm Sara. And I've been a Counting Crows fan since I was about 14 years old when I heard A Long December on pop-up video. How's that for a blast from the past? And then we were having a neighborhood block party, and I just kept playing A Long December over and over again, which is a real great song to play at a pool party. And someone said to me, they have another album. It's called August and Everything After. And they introduced me to the song Mr. Jones, and then it was all over. And I've been a fan ever since. And for me, I think it's really the lyrics. I know there was a prior guest when you had the mother and daughters on who stole my line, which is Counting Crows are the soundtrack of my life. And about 75% of the time, if I say, this reminds me of a line in a song, I'm about to quote a Counting Crows song.
All right, fantastic. Thanks so much. And
I do like your kindly friend, but I do question whether, again, they were trying to be kind or they just wanted to play Mr. Jones at the barbecue instead of like Long December. They were like, this is just...
Long December is really not the right mood music for a pool party and a barbecue.
Yeah. That's right. We'll ease you off this with Mr. Jones. That'll at least.
Oh, that's funny. And our 5th panelist today, Counting Crows fan, Kevin. Please talk about how you got into the Crows and what keeps you with them today.
Yeah, thanks, y'all. So growing up, I got into them in 2002, but before that, my mom was a huge music fan. So I remember, when I was a youngin' in the 90s, driving around with her, listening to August. And I remember she actually bought me along Recovering the Satellites with Along December as the single. And then a few years later, picked up This Desert Life because I loved hanging around on the radio. And I was probably like, 12 at the time, to date myself. But for some reason, This Desert Life just clicked, and I've been a diehard since. So it's been 22 years of fandom, and I keep going back. I think a lot of it is just the live shows. They're my Grateful Dead. I love, seeing them when they're in my city and traveling up and down, the East Coast and the Midwest and whatnot. And also just, Adam is so prolific at introducing fans to other music. And I value that so much. He's definitely opened my ears to so many other bands through the years. So, yeah.
Cool. And just out of random curiosity, even though we don't have a lot of time today, what's one band that is a regular listen for you now that you got exposed to because of Adam?
No, man, so many. I mean, I think, of course, like Big Star is right up there. I'm so
Okay.
glad to know about that band from the Crows.
Yep.
Yeah, Big Star.
Great.
I will say I was at a piano karaoke bar last night, and the song list had Ballad of El Goodo. And I'm not sure anyone but me and the piano player enjoyed. Not that they didn't enjoy, but like no one else was like, man, Big Star at a karaoke bar. But I had a great time. It's one of my favorite songs. So I'm with you there.
Oh, fantastic. Y'all kind of hinted about this already, but before we get into the album and the tracks and some of the details and trivia, maybe just real quick about some of you just said this, but again, maybe listen of your memory of This Desert Life. And this is the one album I guess I've already talked about it on the podcast, that I think this was the first album of theirs. I had all three in order, but this is the first one that I bought the day it was released. And I was kind of in between. I worked for a couple of years, and then I took kind of a gap year, if you will, after my first job. And interesting timing, given the it's been in the news this week, but I was actually working at Red Lobster for a couple months while I was deciding if I wanted to, just travel my whole life or, whatever, live with my parents, be in the streets, move to the big city. I didn't know. And I just remember that somehow I timed it. I think what happened is I picked it up before my shift, right? If I was working like a night shift, I picked it up. And then I said something. For some reason, this sticks with me too. And I remember saying something to the host of, because, if I was 25, maybe the host girl was 18 or something. And I think, I don't know, somehow it came up and they're like, oh, where'd you go before? Oh, I had to pick up Counting Crows, This Desert Life. And then she was like, oh yeah, that's cool. Like almost, but it was interesting because I was like, oh, even someone 7 years younger knows of the Crows and knows that they're a happening band, because it was definitely a positive thing, even though she was a little like, you had to buy it like the second it was released. You're that big of a fan.
You had to.
But yeah. And then I've talked about before how I listened to it all week preparing for the concert. So let's go to Chris. What about your experience, your memory first with the album?
So this is an interesting one because I was a big fan of the song "Colorblind" from the Cruel Intentions soundtrack. We'll talk more about that later. But so I'd heard that, and somehow though, like when the record came out, like I didn't rush out and buy it. And my good friend Adam Zamora gave it to me as a Christmas present in 1999. So I unwrapped it and just went up, avoided my family, and started listening to the Crows. But yeah, it was a Christmas present from a friend, interestingly enough.
But yeah, let's go to Geoff. You're experiencing picking up this Desert Life album CD. I'm guessing you actually picked up a physical copy at some point.
Yeah, so this was my first real job ever in my life out of college was as a music journalist, which was the greatest, probably the greatest job I ever had. And that year, I did get a copy of the album and their press kit, which they sent out, and got to go see them and review them in concert. That was the first time I saw them. So I wrote a review of that show. I actually wrote reviews of all three of those shows, but also eventually got to interview Charlie too about the album. I think it was before the live concert or the live tour that they did. So I got the album as part of that, and I must have had it like right when it came out. But this was probably one of those albums that I would have had immediately, because it was I was such a big fan of Recovering the Satellites, and it was maybe like right at the beginning of the height of my Counting Crows fandom or something like that. So yeah, loved it from the minute I heard it.
Did you have it before release day?
Probably right as it came out. I mean, one of the great things about that job was that the record companies would send you the press kit and the new CD in hopes that you would review the album and, even write about the group if they were on tour or something. So like I said, it was still the best job I ever had, because when bands would come to town, you could like bid to, I'll review that show. and so you get tickets to the concert. So that's definitely how I saw Counting Crows the first time, was writing a review of their show in Kansas City at Memorial Hall. And I think they played like maybe 8 of the songs from the album that night. So yeah, incredible.
And Sarah, what about you?
So I had seen them in concert for the first time 1 week before this album came out. So I'd heard a couple songs on the internet, back when you could, spend 15 minutes downloading a song. And then I heard a few songs a week before that album came out. And I actually don't remember specifically where or how I got the album, but I am very confident that it was on November 2nd. Like, I probably stopped on the way home from school and picked it up, only because the store wasn't open on my way to school.
That's funny. Kevin, your memory. Although you kind of hinted at it a little bit, but yeah.
I did. I hinted at it a little bit, but again, I purchased it, probably in '99 for the Hanging Around single, and then, at that time, that's kind of all. Like, I would put it on every now and then to listen to Hanging Around again. I was pretty young at the time, but my family and I, we did a little family vacation the summer of 2002, and I brought just like a book of CDs and brought this Desert Life again, just for Hanging Around. That's all I had, and I remember putting it on in the car, and none of my family they didn't really care what was on the radio, and the album played over and over, and I was like, again, awakened to this masterpiece. And there's one song on the album that, like, really dug its fingers in, if you will, and it's in the rankings. I'll allude to it once we get there.
All right, thanks so much. So this is the part of the podcast where we let Geoff do his magic and talk about some trivia, fun facts, background about the album without giving away too much, because, of course, he would still prefer if you pick up a copy of Rain King. And so please, Geoff.
Great. And if I go on too long, just give me the cutoff signal. So for the first album, they had the 15-song demo to choose from. For Recovering the Satellites, half the album was written and road tested before they went into the studio. But this time they're going in without as much material for album number 3. And also, Adam is looking for a reset. I think the response to Recovering the Satellite made him want to show a different side of the band, like a lighter side of the band. He wanted to move their image away from the stereotype of being kind of mopey and depressed. It's how we get from Round Here to Accidentally in Love, is through like this Desert Life. So, for example, he gets Neil Gaiman, known for the children's book The Day I Swapped My Dad for Two Goldfish, to do the cover art, and basically is looking for something lighter. In April 1998, they played 2 shows at the Viper Room, and they debuted 3 songs: St. Robinson and His Cadillac Dream, Sundays, and She Don't Want Nobody Near. All 3 songs are going to come out, but only one of them is going to come out on this Desert Life. They choose Dave Lowry and Dennis Herring to produce. Herring was a producer of the final 2 Camper Van Beethoven albums. And Camper Van Beethoven was a Northern California band that was popular in the 80s, and David Immergluck played with them. And that's how they met Adam, and they had kind of run in each other's circles for a long time and knew each other. So they, again, were recording in a house, this time overlooking, as we learned from your podcast, overlooking the Hollywood Bowl. Adam didn't live in the house. It sounded like the production team lived there, so that the band could kind of show up and record any time that the muse struck. In May, they did some preliminary work with Dave Lowry. in the house. And Lowry talked about how Hanging Around was one of the early demos that Adam had brought in. And Lowry sort of seized upon that as having some potential to be a single, and thought that and kind of kept bringing the band back around to that song. Recorded on a casino in a hill. Emmy was on hand much more. They had a private chef. There's a full-size basketball court. So it's a pretty relaxed atmosphere. In September 1998, they come up with Baby, I'm a Big Star Now. The great song that was going to be used was used in the movie Rounders. Adam decided that he wanted to keep the song. He wasn't going to give it away and let them use it on the soundtrack. So he said, you can use it in the movie, but you can't put it on the soundtrack. And then when he decided not to use it in On This Desert Life, they decided not to do a Rounders soundtrack. So the song kind of never came out. It was only later that it was sort of semi-released. But the great lost song from this album. In January 1999, Geffen announces that they have become part of this conglomerate merger with A&M Records and Interscope. And effectively, Counting Crows is now working for Interscope Records and label mates with Limp Bizkit, Nine Inch Nails, Eminem, and Snoop Dogg. And the corporate bean counters from Interscope show up to the mansion to hear what they're working on for the new album. Adam plays them Mrs. Potter's Lullaby, the 8-minute song, which they, needless to say, cannot envision as a single. In March, Colorblind comes out on the Cruel Intentions soundtrack. It's not really necessarily a hit, but it's kind of a well-known song, gives them a little bit of a boost. In May at the Shim Sham Club with Emmy, Adam announces that they have finished the album. They play 4 Days and Mrs. Potter's Lullaby at that show. And then they tour that summer. They go out on tour with the album finished. They play Hanging Around, start playing it. They play Woodstock 1999 or Woodstock 99 on July 24th. On Halloween, they play the famous Devil and Bunny show dressed in the pink bunny suit. And then Hanging Around is released in October 18th as the lead single with the video. It hits number 1 on the AAA charts, and it's their biggest charting hit. It hit number 28 on the Billboard actual top 100 charts, song charts. The album itself is released November 2nd, 1999. It goes platinum and peaks at number 8 on the charts. The band plays Conan O'Brien. They play Hanging Around with Joe 90 and the Gigolo Ants joining them. We'll talk about that later. And then they played Letterman doing Hanging Around solo. They do a whole bunch of touring for this album, including the co-tour with Live. And I will stop there. That's a little bit of kind of a lead up to it. Sorry if that was too long.
No, fantastic. It was exactly what I expected. And you took a couple of lines. Chris, did you want to comment on any of that? No. Okay. I'll keep going. Yeah, it is true. Yeah. And as I've mentioned on the podcast before, it was just random. I wasn't perched in front of my TV at home. But I remember when they when they first made a big deal about the video on Total Request Live or whatever, that one that they did in downtown or in Times Square, right? With Carson Daly, what is it, right?
Yeah.
And then I remember he's like, yeah, here we go, the world. And it's weird because that kind of mixed opinion, especially in the 90s, where you want your favorite band to get a lot of exposure because they deserve it. But then, part of it was I don't know, right? Is this too mainstream? I don't know. But I loved seeing that video and I was like, wow, the Crows are still on top of the world. Interesting.
Yeah,
we'll
you
talk
also
about
have to watch TRL, the rest of TRL, to get to the Crow song.
Yeah, and I don't think I did. I think they kicked off the show just with the debut, and then went into the actual request after that, I think. Yeah, it's funny, Geoff. One thing I thought of with this album was that Hanging Around was such a major hit, and we could talk about this, but why? They did release official other singles, but they didn't make a major video with them. Like you said, it reached platinum after a couple months, January of 2000. I almost think it could have went multi-platinum if they did better promotion of the other singles. I've always been curious about that because officially they released Mrs. Potter single in August of 2000. So that's almost like a year later. And then even the video, you could tell, was kind of, done fairly cheaply and I don't even know if it was played how much on VH1 or MTV at all. I remember watching it on the internet.
Yeah, right. They're all my friends. I think was a single.
Exactly.
Also.
I was just about to say All My Friends, which looked like it was basically shot on somebody's
Right.
camcorder. And so, and it was, right? We even talked to Matt about that a little bit. And as you said, Colorblind was officially not a single. So, especially back then when they charted so well and were popular, like, why didn't they make Colorblind the single and have a video? I don't know. I think they would have doubled their album sales. I'm not sure if they were fighting with the label or if the label, but yeah, you could see that if the first single didn't do well, but it did very well. So Wikipedia.
See, I don't think so.
Yeah,
I think that's part of the issue here with this record from a commercial perspective, not as a record, but I think Hanging Around is so disconnected from the rest of the record that it's a wonderful single, but I don't think any of these songs, I mean, other than that, are really commercial songs in 1999, 2000. Maybe Colorblind, if they'd agreed to cut down Mrs. Potter's, although good on them for not doing that. I don't know. Could St. Robinson have been a single? Maybe. But it's a really, I find Hanging Around is sort of disconnected from the record in that way, and I think that's maybe why it didn't become bigger. Although again, it sold 1 million records, so
no, that's true. It might have been them trying to find the label trying to. I mean, just because of kind of the tightness of it. Yeah, maybe you'd even argue 4 days could have been possibly,
maybe.
But you're right that there is some limitation there. Yeah, thank you, Geoff, for your thoughts. And Adam, I because I have no good research skills, I just went right to Wikipedia. And Adam, the quote that they had was Adam said that this album is that life is about confusion and change. And we'll maybe talk about that confusion and change. And David Lowery said, like you said, kind of hinted at maybe a little brighter, wanted to show some of their humor and reverence is what he said. The last part of trivia I'm going to mention before we get into our song rankings, which is the main point of today's show, which is I always like looking at who wrote the songs, right? So Adam, of course, wrote all the songs and many himself, or he gets at least partial writing credit of all of them. So Dan was a major contributor on this. So both High Life and Speedway was written by Adam and Dan, which I find totally fascinating. Amy Hit the Atmosphere, written by Adam and Matt. I think it's the only song that they did together. Hanging Around was a team effort, as it had Adam, Dan, Ben, and Bryson, I think if I remember correctly. And then Colorblind and I Wish I Was a Girl, Adam and Charlie, and nobody else. That's also interesting. I found that also interesting that Charlie was a writer of that, given that in concert. Oh no, that's right. No, Charlie does play the piano on that. And that's it. Well, in one interesting thing, which we didn't talk about, Geoff, is that when actually, and I didn't research it, when actually does Emmy become a member? Emmy's in the photo, right, in This Desert Life. But interestingly enough, especially compared to today, he has no writing credit for any of the songs. So
yeah, and he played on some of the songs, but not a lot. He wasn't as deeply involved in this album as he would become with the albums that came after it. So
exactly, yeah, Hard Candy was kind of a transition, and then of course now he's heavily involved. So I thought that was interesting. Okay. Let's go.
Then Adam, of course, always writes 100% of the lyrics. So when he is collaborating with the band members, it's on the music, but the lyrics always are 100% Adam as well. So
that's true. That's worth repeating and noting. Okay, so here we go. There are 11 songs. We decided, as usual, to officially include Kid Things, the very 90s, early 2000s bonus track. You had to go into a little bit, and we will talk about Kid Things. So 11 songs, so 10 songs plus Kid Things is 11. So here we go. Everybody sent their list ahead of time. As always, they don't know what each other put. I do. I rank them. Here we go. Let's start. This is official, right? Once it's done, this is, can never change. The band should know about this.
It is canonically true.
It's canonically true, exactly. Until next week when we listen to it 20 more times, next year when we listen to it 30 more times and thought, you know what? I always did like that one a little better. Okay. So here we go. The number 11. Oh, and by the way, the interesting thing, this was actually the hardest album for me to rank, especially in the middle. I kind of had my top two, and maybe my bottom 4 or 5. But the ones in the middle, I was like, this should be 3 or 9. I'm not sure, whatever it is. I'm not sure. And that came across in the rankings. And so that's worth saying, where number 1 and 2 were clear 1 and 2. The bottom 4 were pretty clear bottom 4. But numbers 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 were almost a tie. I mean, there were a couple points things. So, but yeah, so that'll be interesting. So here we go, number 11. And actually, this was a clear number 11. Here we go, Geoff. I know you'll be interested in this one. Kid Things. Kid Things. And I joked about this because Geoff actually put it as his 11th, and he's like, oh, probably the only one. And the reason I laughed about that is because if you go to, I'm not a big message board person, but if you go to message board or Reddit, it seems like Kid Things is this huge fan favorite of the hardcore fans. And so interestingly enough, 3 of us had it near the end, including me. 2 of us, though, did have it in the middle. So I'll start with them. It's actually our 2 guests, so we might not invite them back. But no, Sara and Kevin both had it number 5. So Sara, I'll start with you. Why did you rank Kid Things pretty high?
I did number 7.
Oh, okay.
So fifth from the bottom.
Oh, yeah, right. 5th and bottom. Exactly. Sorry. Number 7. Yep.
I mean, it's okay. On other albums, it would not have ranked as highly, but I mean, on other it's a decent song, but I don't love it. And there's just other songs I like more, but there's other songs I like less.
No, that makes sense. What about you, Kevin?
Yeah, I had this pretty close to you, Sara. I had it at number 6. So many songs on this album are just looser than I feel like many of the other Crows songs, which really comes across in the beginning. But like, you have this fun, loose country rock sound, and I love that he plays like the electric mandolin on this. But I feel like they made that decision because it mirrors a fiddle. So I feel like there is that cool, like, creative instrumentation in the song. Obviously, like, Charlie's on guitar, which is funky. But for me, yeah, I think it's a great, fun song. So I had it pretty much like smack dab right in the middle.
Yeah, thank you. I actually noticed that little thing that you said too, about the instrumentation was pretty interesting. I don't have too much to add about Kid Things. I think this is like, and I'd be curious to know why some Crows fans have it in like their top 10 songs or things that they really want to hear live. I thought it was like the perfect extra track. I don't think it's as good as the other 10. It's kind of a nice little thing. It's kind of jammy and then of course in the recording they add that little beginning part to it where they're talking, and a little bit afterwards about where they're kind of teasing each other at the end of that recording, which I always thought was funny. And I was trying to always listen to something. Can I learn something about the band? I think it's that they're waiting for Adam, right? They say like no go. I think it's that they're waiting for Adam to get ready, and they're just kind of teasing each other and having fun. Geoff, am I wrong? I always thought it was like a kind of a Rolling Stones tribute-ish kind of sound.
I can hear the Dead Flowers kind of connection there, and the little country honk sort of spirit of it. Yeah, it is interesting. Fun fact, they played this live, chose this song to play live when they played The Tonight Show with Jay Leno for this album, right. And so you can go to YouTube and watch them play it with Charlie on guitar. And as Kevin pointed out, with Emmy playing the electric mandolin, which is just interesting to watch anybody play that instrument. But yeah, to me, a hidden track is like, has there ever been a hidden track that's like, oh man, that's the one? Nobody puts the hidden track as the best song. Even Dave Lowry talked about, we front loaded the best, catchiest songs at the beginning of the album. So the last song and the hidden track is never going to be the single. It's never going to be the one that the band thought, this is the key track to the album, or it wouldn't be hidden, right? I mean, it seems to me like just by nature, a hidden song can't be the best song on the album because it's a hidden track.
You're ticking off those Chelsea fans again, Geoff.
Chelsea,
we already had this.
But it also hilariously, right? That turned into with Big Yellow Taxi, which we'll get to down the line. But right, that was essentially it was a hidden track that turned into a giant single on a remix. So
they had to unhide it.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually think this song is sort of better. Put it this way. I think this song is better as a song disconnected from this record. It feels like at the end of this record, it feels like a bonus. I think if you take it maybe in another context, you'd hear it and you go, oh, maybe that is something that's really interesting. But I don't know, something about hearing at the end of this record, I was like, no, it's the end. That's the bottom of my list because of these other, it didn't hit me the way some of these other songs do. But I think part of that is just the way it is very different contextually from the rest of the record.
Oh, great. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. So it came across as kind of a fun song, kind of jammy song, but not as deep lyrically and musically maybe as some of the other songs on the album. Okay. Here we go. Number 10. This is also, and this was actually, and this was I think I'm the only person that actually had this exactly 10th, but other people did have it low. But somebody, yes. So this is the only person who's going to be annoyed by this will be Chris. So number 10 on our list is Speedway.
Oh dear.
So let's start with Chris, who had it as his third favorite song on the album.
This is one of my favorite Crow songs. And I think I talked a little bit about this in the podcast, but this was a white whale for me. I had a real moment with this song about 10 years ago. Went to a show where I think I later saw the set list and they had scratched it out. It had been a scratch out. And then it took me a solid decade to see it. Then I saw it in 22 and 23. I think this is from a vocal, like one of Adam's best vocal performances on the record. He crushes this, and particularly that bridge. And in listening to this again, you can really feel the what's beautiful about the singing in the bridge is the way it rises up out of the quiet of the rest of the song, which really kind of mirrors the emotional content of it, right? Which is this guy is kind of feeling kind of trapped in and doesn't know what to say, and almost mute. And then you like sort of finds that voice in that bridge. And that line, the bottom line, all this time, the bottom line is, you don't know how much I feel. And just like that, very straightforward, always hits me. It's I think it's a fantastic song, but
Cool.
I'm outvoted.
Thank you so much. Let's go to Geoff, who had the next highest. He had it at number 8. So,
okay, yeah. So I do think that there are other songs on the album that are in this same vein that are better in my rankings. Like Amy, Hit the Atmosphere, and All My Friends, specifically to me, are better kind of songs in this vein. For a song called Speedway, it does just kind of sit there, but. What's cool to me is how the different instruments are used sporadically. They sort of come in and out. And it's a real feature of the production on This Desert Life, and something that I think really sets it apart from their other albums. Even albums like Recovering the Satellites and Hard Candy that have a lot of this kind of stuff going on. Speedway, like the bass comes in after verse 1A, which I was obviously geeking out and listening to this really closely, but the bass doesn't come in until after basically the first part of the first verse. Just like in High Life, it's the same thing. And so the use of space is so prevalent in this song and in this album. They don't fill every possible inch of space with fills and little foo-foos and stuff like that, particularly on this song. Listen to the ending of this song. The musicians hold the line. There's this sense of restraint. They hold the line all the way. There's no big finish on this song, which there could be, but they hold it. They hold it. And there's a real discipline to that use of space. And it's going to come up, I think it's used even more prevalently and better. But this song to me is like the dividing line between the songs that I just love and the songs that I don't like as much on this album. There are some songs that I don't like as much, but Speedway, I think, has a lot to offer because of those qualities, which I really do admire in the song.
Thanks, Geoff. I had it as my second lowest next to Kid Things. I don't really have too much to say. It's just the other 9 songs I've all loved in various ways, or maybe even been in my top 3 depending on the year. But this one, I always liked it. But it's funny you said that, Geoff, because in the last 5 years, even though I like the song, but it's clearly maybe my least favorite of the main 10, I did notice what you said. And I always appreciated that. Like, you're absolutely right in the restraint and the production and the idea. And I did get to see it live in 2022, and it was a pleasure to listen to, and it was great. I guess I think he started right. He was starting off some concerts with that, right?
It was
I
an
think
opener
Chris.
yeah, it was like an occasional. It was in the opener rotation in 20.
Yeah, it was in the opener rotation, and he said he kind of liked starting off with that. So great. I won't add any more, and I don't know if Sarah and Kevin have anything particular to say. Both of you, we'll start with Sarah. Both of you had it as number 11 on your list.
Yeah, I just find it boring.
Okay, so that's the commentary. A little, right? I could understand that. Yeah.
A couple years ago, and like I couldn't even remember what song it was. We were halfway through the song before I even figured it out, and yeah, I don't know much else to say.
All right, thank you, Kevin.
Yeah, I had a note here, Chris, about the vocals on the bridge. You know, I had this. Let me just say, I had this ranked number 11. But the vocals on the bridge are fantastic. I think, to me, it touches on a lot of the themes of this album, which I think it's more of Adam living with fame as opposed to, like, you know, have you seen me lately? I just got famous. It's more like, this is my life now, and here's how I'm dealing with it. And I feel like the lyrics in Speedway are just a little too general for me and unrelatable. I hate to make this comparison. I don't want to bring in other albums, but it reminds me of Anyone But You off Saturday nights and Sunday mornings, which is a little bit of a low point. So that's why I had it at number 11.
All right, thank you, Kevin. So let's go on to then our next one, which would be number 9 on the list. So, yes, So, as I said, I'm generally happy because my lowest 2. So I knew that, at least for me, things would start getting controversial because I basically love all of the top 9 songs. And yeah, so this is one. I guess I have this highest on my list. This is, and I already mentioned it once on the show. This has always been one that I just think, oh, right. We kind of, Chris, our last episode, we kind of loosely said was underrated songs. Although I had somebody text me and be like, how can you put Raining in Baltimore as underrated? Everybody loves that song.
I don't think that's, someone else said that to me too. I don't think that's true. I think there are people who love that song, but I also think that is not a lot of people's favorites anyway.
But it is funny. And then Daylight Fading, it's a single. How can that be underrated? Top 3. No, so I actually think this is their first maybe criminally underrated song from the first 3 albums, which is 4 Days. And so we have Kevin had it I guess I'll go first since I had it the highest. I put it as number 5. Yeah. And I was yeah, is that correct? Yeah, and I was kind of waffling on different ones. I think I had it as high as 3, 4, 5. I just think it's tight. Atmospherically, like when one of the things I love about the Crows, and this will come up a lot, and I think he does a great job of this in somewhere Under Wonderland, is when he has lines. And I guess you kind of already said this in Speedway, but you can almost like the lyrics themselves also match the music, and you could really vividly picture the video almost, or some kind of imagery. And I feel that about the Black Ohio Skies when he mentions it in 4 Days. I just think it's such a tight song too, which is why I said it could be a single. It's not excessive. That kind of goes into, Geoff, maybe your part, that I love the production on this album, right? Like every song, sometimes there is like added layers, sometimes there's not. And as someone who, and maybe Geoff and Chris, or the two of you can comment, I'm not a 70s rock aficionado, but to me this sounds like a real tribute to like 60s and 70s kind of rock with the harmonies. And anyway, I just thought this is not a skippable song for me. I love the middle part of the album. Let's go to who had it next high. Geoff, actually, it was you. You had it as number 7.
Yeah. Well, this is, again, a song that I love on this album, I think. So here are a couple of interesting things that I learned even just in preparing for our talk today. Dave Lowry said that this was the first real song that the band wrote for the album. He said that on your podcast. Emmy is playing bass on this song. And you
Wow.
can tell that Emmy's playing bass. Now, I didn't know this until I'd been listening to it for a while, but I've been listening to it closely and going, it's interesting in this song how the bass is really the driving instrument. It's really doing most of the heavy lifting. Even the little solo part at the end of the chorus before the turnaround to the second verse is like done on the bass. It's usually the guitars doing this type of thing. And I was going like, wow, Matt Malley, come on, you're amazing. And then I found out, I looked at the credits and I was like, oh, that's Emmy. So that makes a lot more sense that a guitar player is doing this. The guitars are much more foundational compared to the bass lines. And that's one of the things that I think actually makes this song sound interesting. It's such an interesting sounding album.
Yes.
The arrangement of the instruments and the fact that Emmy's playing the bass in almost the lead way on this song, I think makes it an interesting sounding song. Now, another little piece of trivia, Clay Jones, one of the unsung heroes of the album, somebody who I'd love to hear an interview with on a Counting Crows podcast, for example. Clay Jones is a bluegrass musician from North Carolina who comes in and does a little Scottie Pippen on this album and becomes like the key man to Adam's Michael Jordan. And so on this track, not so much. We don't hear the real Clay Jones sound. We'll hear about him later, but he's actually the guy playing the electric guitar on this song. It's not Dan Vickery. Now, again, he holds back. He doesn't play at all during the first verse, and then just a few simple lines on the guitar, a few little lead lines. You think it's Vickery, but it's not. So again, we have those intricate, like this is the California sound with the interwoven harmonies that are the real hallmark of an album like this and Hard Candy that I think, again, make this a standout track for me. So yeah, I love 4 Days. I think it's very cool. And also I think that the shakeup of the instrumentation and of the players on this song make it different sounding than anything else.
Yeah. Thank you. It's funny. I'm glad you put it that way because that I'm thinking that I love the harmonies in this, which again I've said a lot of times they're so unappreciated by the harmonies they do. I think that's one of Counting Crows' actual legacy is their harmonies. For a more right, especially for in the '90s and after. But yeah, almost the guitars have harmony.
Of the Beach Boys, you know,
right. That's right. But Geoff, yeah, I think the guitars themselves actually play in harmony in this song more than in the other song. So I agree with you. And of course, has typical Crows lyrics about, mentioning, whatever ex-girlfriends and everything else. So let's go to who had it next. The rest of you basically had it the same. So we'll go to Geoff, Chris, who had this as number 9.
Yeah. Well, I actually think, Eric, I don't think it's about an ex-girlfriend. I think it's about a current girlfriend who has gone away for a bit.
Yeah, he did mention
in Ohio.
That.
I believe.
Sorry, I was just. You're right. I'm just joking. Girlfriend's ex, future, whatever. Yeah.
Again, this is where I was looking. I had this at number 9, but really from 4 to 9, I have a lot of those songs kind of grouped in a lot of ways, and this one, maybe just from like a lyrical perspective, didn't just quite hit me as much. But to Geoff's point, it's a really cool and interesting song, a kind of a fun song to hear live. Particularly, it's also kind of an interesting song live because if they do play it in Ohio, it does get a giant cheer. And they do seem to remember, as much as Adam, is a little resistant to like playing to the crowd, they'll play 4 Days in Ohio and get a big cheer on Ohio Rising. So, yeah.
Thank you.
I did not realize that was not Dan on that one. Interesting.
Yeah, so I always think of this one, Ohio, and I'll give a shout out here because he's the one who sent me a lot of bootlegs, including when we talk about Face the Promised Land. And by the time I got to Woodstock, he actually had original copies. My friend Dan Buckler, who used to follow, I don't want to say follow them around, but he was a really hardcore fan. He thought that this album was the pinnacle of their musicianship, I guess, if you will. And he's from Ohio originally. So yeah, I always think of him when I hear this too. Let's go to Sara, who had this as number 9.
I don't really have much to say about this song. There's other songs on this album, most of the ones coming up that I have a lot to say about, and this one I don't. So I had it at number 9.
All right, Kevin, let's go to you, who had it number 10, a little lower.
Yeah, lower as well. Just 2 things. First, I love how Lowry and Herring put the acoustic guitar up front of the mix. I think, Geoff, to your point, along with the bass, the acoustic is like nice and crisp and really driving. So we love to see Bryson getting his flowers. But also, I don't want to steal any thunder, but this is a part of the trilogy, right? The 4 Days, Kid Things, Mrs. Potter's Lullaby. So maybe we'll save that, but definitely something to call. I think that's just such an interesting tie to those three songs across the album. It's so fun.
Oh, that's cool. Thank you. And you know what's so funny about you saying that? I thought because you said, would you say the first of the trilogy? And it's so weird that you say that. And I'll mention this when we get to some of the higher rankings. I have my own personal trilogy in this album, and it's just tracks 4, 5, 6. I just love. I mean, I love the whole album, but I love that middle part. I'll never skip it. And to me, it starts with 4 Days. And there we go. So so this is number 8 now, and I want to say the final song we'll talk about in the third tier, if you will. As I said, definitely top 2 songs, and then kind of the middle all lumped together, and these bottom 4 were pretty clear, the bottom 4. And this, I guess, a quick review, seems to have been the most controversial song, and I'm absolutely not surprised by this, which is that most of us had it fairly low, somebody had it very high, which is the song from Cruel Intentions, Colorblind. So let's see who had it the highest. Chris, it looks like you did at number 2. So let's talk to you. So you might be again. So Chris is really 2 of your big songs, Colorblind and Speedway, has been sideswiped by the rest of the group. So Chris, we'll go to you. Yeah. Oh, you're muted, Chris. I think. Yeah.
This to me, this one's a classic. I'm kind of surprised. First of all, I saw Cruel Intentions in the theaters because, to date myself, I'm 16 in 1999. So yes, indeed, I'm going to see Cruel Intentions. It's such a beautiful use in the movie. It's sort of memorable. I actually can sort of still. I don't remember much about that movie at this point, but I can still see Sarah Michelle Gellar like coming up that escalator to see Ryan Phillippe to this song, and it's like a very it's a beautiful kind of moment in the movie. And I've always found it just be a beautiful like love song. You know, Adam talks about how he doesn't write love songs a lot, but I think this is a really beautiful love song. In fact, one of the tables at my wedding were named after songs. And there was a table named Colorblind, because that's a song both my wife and I really love, and I think it's a beautiful one. So yeah, I'm surprised. I mean, in terms of say about in the song, it's a beautiful arrangement, a beautiful piano moment. It's also, I mean, I wonder, you know, it's become a song that's played a lot. It wasn't for a long time. I remember a time where them playing that song was like, oh shoot, they're playing Colorblind, and obviously it's become something that's very, very common for them. But I still like it anytime it comes on, and I'll listen to it. Yeah, surprised, but you know, I accept. I have to understand this isn't just about me.
No, and I think you called it for me. The rest of us had it almost all exactly the same. I'll start first. I put it as I guess I had it number 9 on my list. Although now in retrospect, I actually should have had an 8. You sold me on moving it up one spot, Chris. But yeah, you know, and I do think you're correct that maybe the kind of being played a lot in concert has lowered it a bit. I mean, I will say that when I first heard the song, and that's why I said everything in the top 9 has moved from like, you know, 1 to 9 through the years. When I first had the album, this was probably my number 2 song or number 3. I do think the arrangement, as you said, is like a 10 out of 10. I love that xylophone that they play at the end, right? I think that's brilliant. I think his singing actually, both live and on the track, almost kind of what you were talking about with Speedway. I think his singing for this song is a 10 out of 10. I just like other songs better, and the lyrics to me are not. I know what he's getting at, but I don't love them as much as some of the other lyrics with the coffee black and egg white. But the I Am Fine, yes, when we first got the album, we heard the I Am Fine. I remember me and my friend having a few beers and almost like kind of, I don't know what the word is, like not shaking, but like we were like, whoa, this is moving us. This is why we love Adam. So let's go to Geoff, and I forget where you had it. 10, maybe number 10, I think.
Yeah, number 10. Sometimes the Crows get into this lane, and I don't like it when they're in this lane. And to me, this is just an example of that. I like the xylophone notes. Dave Lowry mentioned on your podcast that this song was particularly sort of challenging or difficult to get right. Um, the one thing that I will say about Colorblind, though, is that this has never been a song that I liked from the first time I heard the album or whatever. Every single time I have seen them play this live, it gets me. And I mean, gets me 100%, where I'm like, this song's the best song they've ever done. Every time they play this live, I'm going, oh God, as soon as they start it. And by the end of the song, I'm like, this is their best song. So there's something about this song that, despite the fact that I would not rank it highly, like I said, they convince me every single time they play it live that it's one of their best songs.
Thanks,
and I
Geoff.
will say, Geoff, the one thing I do think is a difference that comes out when we do these rankings. I really like this lane of the band. I think that's a difference as we go. But I really, when they're playing, it's Adam and a piano or like that always works for me.
Yeah,
me too. Sorry. I was just saying, I like that lane too, but sometimes, I don't know, there's just a way that they...
Is this, I kind of hinted at, we'll have to think about this and maybe correct me if I'm wrong throughout the pod. Is this the like only piano driven song, like the Raining in Baltimore Long December type of Goodnight LA that Adam doesn't play? That Charlie actually plays. It might be. So I'd have to think about that.
Well, it's certainly, yeah. If you're defining sort of like the quiet piano things,
the quiet piano stuff.
I mean, because there's a couple of, I would think. Well, there's one song, Mrs. Potter's, I would say, is kind of a piano-driven song. Same with even like Holiday in Spain is in a lot of ways piano-driven, but there's much more full arrangements that as opposed to this.
That's true.
Or it's
not. And now Millard plays. And now Millard plays that one, right? Is that the one that Millard sometimes plays? Obviously. But by the way, Chris, I also did see Cruel Intentions in it, and kind of like the TD Total Request Live. And actually, ironically, I saw the movie in Poland of all places. I was backpacking, and I had one of those like, I don't want to see a museum today. I just want something American, right? There was very little internet back then, or maybe you go to the internet cafe just to check your Yahoo email or something. And I was like, okay, kind of, right. I wasn't too far from that age. But I remember thinking like, yeah, I love that my favorite band is getting exposure. Like, I loved it. I'm like, yeah, see, I know good music, and they're in this, and it's in Poland. So, right, with the overdubs.
Eric, Sara, what's more Crows-esque than backpacking through Europe while seeing a Counting Crows-driven movie?
Exactly. I loved it. So let's go to you, Kevin, since you just said hi. You had this, now I'm forgetting, you had it number 8.
Yes. I had it a little low, but I think that obviously I think Adam has pushed back when folks are like, "Oh, you're a poet," and he's like, "I'm not. I write songs. I'm a lyricist," which is obvious. But I remember hearing that in a couple interviews. I do feel the lyrics of the song are so delicate and simple. I feel like it really does read like a piece of poetry, which I love, and I think that's what makes it so unique. But I had it so low, I think, because of what we all said. I've heard it in concert so many times. And I think what's so funny about seeing it, Adam is he's acting when he sings the song. He's got like all the, I'm covered in skin and, the kind of the emotive hand motions, which I love. But I don't know. For me at this point, I'm kind of like, okay, we got it. We're good. And Chris, to your point too, I always read this song as like, is it an early representation of the dissociative disorder that he had gone through, some of the mental health issues, think, which I think is really interesting upon listening to it.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. I think you're right there. No, that's a great point. Sara, let's go to you at it number 8, kind of mid to low.
So I thought that I was going to drag down the rankings on this one and that more people would have it higher like Chris did. And also, it kind of surprises me that I don't like this song more because I really like other songs in this vein, like Raining in Baltimore is probably a top 3 song for me on that album. A Long December is a top 3 Crows song for me. And so I feel like I should like this one, but I don't. But I do recognize that it is a pretty song and a lot of people like it.
All right, thanks. By the way, this is just reminding me of why I like the Crows, that there is sometimes these instrument changes. Like we just say, oh, Miller plays piano now, and Adam doesn't always play piano on the silent piano songs. I actually love that it's sometimes unpredictable, interesting. It shows that they're all great musicians, which we've always said, even though they might do things a little different. And I think they like challenging themselves too, which is part of it. Okay,
I think
so
it's one of the
now we're
advantages of the band size too, right? They
yes.
do have 7 people, and again, but to your point though, also Eric, the challenge and the egolessness, right? Where you're like, well, I can just stand over here and like play a shaker if I need to,
Oh, right.
you
We're
know.
Big Yellow, we're Dave on Big Yellow Taxi, right? Yep, absolutely. So that's the bottom four. Now we're going to go into the mid tier, where geez, I guess 7 was 1 point low, but really 3 points separated these. So if one person had placed it a couple points higher or lower, it would have changed all these rankings. But we did develop a ranking. I guess there was only one official tie that would be for fourth place. But let's go with number 7. And so, okay, which is just Amy Hit the Atmosphere. We'll get right into it. The person who had this highest was Sara, who put this number 3 on her list. So we'll start with her.
I really like this song. I saw them play in concert before the album came out, and I had heard this song on the internet, and this was the song that I really wanted to hear them play. And I still remember being a 16-year-old at my first Counting Crows concert and having this amazing moment when I heard the opening of Amy Hit the Atmosphere.
That's great. Who put it the next? It's funny you said that. I guess I'll just go with me. I had it number 8, so this matched where I put it. Again, this is more of just that through the years, I like the other songs better, and I've talked 100 times, or Chris and I have talked about how they haven't played it live in forever, and we're hoping to get the ground swelling that they'll eventually, which is funny because it's not like it's my favorite song. I put it number 8. I'm just like, come on, this is just a song that fans do want to hear live. But Sara, to your point, and I think kind of like Colorblind, I think when the album was released, I want to say this is the one that grabbed my attention. It might have been my number 3 for the first couple of years of release. And just like you, I think this was the song that I was most excited to hear live. And they did play it live in that one time I saw them. So I understand that. Let's go to Geoff, who had it number 6.
Yeah, another song. I really love this song. This is one where I really think that use of space is so done so well. These long, deliberate pauses. Adam is on piano on this, and see, I like this lane. Maybe like just don't bring in the horn, and I'm good. The harmonies, once again, the background vocals on this. At one point, Adam is doing his own counter vocal, which is just incredible. It's so cool. And I think that the harmonies had just really developed in some interesting ways on this. I guess Dan Vickery apparently has a lot to do with that, is what I think Dave Lowry said that on your podcast. When I interviewed Charlie about this album, he was talking about this song and other songs like this, and he said, the first album we were kind of figuring out who we were, and the second album had a lot going on instrumentally, and it was a bit chaotic. But he said this album, this is the sound of the band. We found the sound of the band with the harmonies and everything else. The xylophone here, almost like a horse dreamer in this kind of winding, swirling harmonies. So I love this song. I think it's this is one of those songs that just sounds so great on this album. And I think it's a real standout. The song like this, it's hard. You go like this could be a lot higher on my rankings, but
absolutely. Yeah. I wouldn't feel bad putting this like number 2 or 3, and I put it number 8. That's why I said this was the toughest album for me. I mean, this song, I think it's like perfectly done. I know that what Adam says, he only has like maybe one perfect song, Long December. I can't think of anything that would be changed on this. And what about the change of pace at the end, which is funny because he mentions change of pace in the song, right? Where it just comes that the I want to know, all I really know is, right, that kind of comes out of nowhere. Anytime, by the way, I think it's all Dan Vickery. I've mentioned this a couple times. Anytime that I hear and he obviously does it. I want to ask him about it. And when I met him last year, I forgot to ask him about it, but he always, anything that like has something about like stars or satellites, and he does like those kind of spacey sound effect thing with his guitar. Do you know what I'm talking about, Geoff and Chris? Like, he does it a couple times, and this is one that also has that. So let's go to Chris. And where did you have this?
I had it number 8. Again, this is in that group where I have them pretty tight, and it just sort of landed at the bottom. Really, again, I think more from the lyrical content not hitting me as much, because it's a beautiful arrangement, and I would love to see them play it live, because I think it'd be really interesting to see them arrange it for live performance in current day. There's, again, the real movement. The backing vocals are kind of a really cool, stunning piece of this, and it's a beautifully arranged song. So no criticisms of this one. I actually really I like the song. It just sort of didn't land towards the top on that for me on that one.
All right, thank you. Let's go to Sarah. Oh no, sorry, you already talked about Kevin.
Yeah. I had this one at number 4. This is one of my favorites. I think just in terms of a lush sounding song, there's so much to hear. I feel like every time I listen to it, I mean, as we've all said, the arrangement is brilliant, but I'm not surprised Adam wrote it with Matt, because there's a sitar on the outro. Like, what gets more lush in 60s and 70s rock than putting a sitar there? I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure you can hear it like at the very high end, maybe in the last like 20 seconds, which I just think it's fascinating and makes it so unique. But the background vocals, I always think of like a hidden track. You listen to it and you're like, wait, what is he saying? You know, what's kind of the counter melody here? I love it. And just as something funny, you know, I remember telling my wife, if we ever had kids, what we named them, and I was always like, oh, Amy is one of my favorite names. So thanks to this track.
So wait, did one of your? Oh, did you say you don't have children?
No, we don't have kids. No.
But Amy's in the run. Amy's in the running because of this song.
It's in the running, yeah.
Okay, absolutely. Yeah, I always laugh at.
That's how my daughter came to be named Horse Dreamer, which is really, so it's just weird that you say that.
Well, no, it's funny you said that, because when we were saying that, because Amy, this one always like. Right, like for some of these names, like Maria, like, some he has more positive connotation, but I always thought that Amy and I guess like Marjorie, like you said, of Dreaming of Horses, like you could name, your daughter that, but then for some reason some of the songs came across that they might have been a little troubled too. So I don't know, but
She gets out in this song. She's the character is troubled, but she does get to a nice place.
Oh, that's good. Well, and in fact, to be honest, that could be right. More of because that's how life is, right? Someone that could deal with the challenges might be a better one. No, that's great. Yeah, I Geoff and Kevin, when you were talking, part of me that I guess I don't know how to say it other way, but this is a really good example that if it was done by, like, if they wrote the same song, but it was done by a different band or with fewer people or without the complications or without the arrangement or production, it wouldn't be as perfect, right? Like that I could see someone else recording this song and it's not that good. And then to hear, I just think it's like, it's perfect. So, okay. Let's now move to the next one, which is only 1 point higher. This would be number 6, so right in the middle of our ranking, exactly in the middle. And let's see where people put this. I had Geoff and I. Yeah, Geoff. See, we're friends in this one. We're friends with Kid Things, and both of us had it in our top 3. Chris had it down a little bit, and then and Kevin had it in the middle. Sara had it quite low, which is High Life. So let's start with, I have some thoughts, but let's start with Geoff. Geoff, you and I both had High Life in our top 3. We both had it number 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, to me, there's something about High Life that is like the quintessential desert life song. And I know I'm stealing one of your lines here, Eric, because I've heard you say something like this too.
Yeah, good. And I was going to say it again. So thank you. I love to see we're all finally on the same page after all these albums.
But we're exactly on the same page with that. I heard you say that on an episode and I'm like, yes, that's right. There's something about this song that's just the quintessence of this album, with the instruments floating in and out, and here comes percussion. Adam Duritz, it's one of his finest vocal performances on this album. I'm a sucker for a great singer, and he's such an amazing singer. And when he really throws down on a song like this, then I'm always interested and sold on it. I think this is a song, and there are many of them on this album, that shows how nicely they incorporate strings into their music without it being sort of imposed upon the song or like sound. It could easily, you bring in the strings or the horns, and immediately we're going from Louie Louie to we're creating art now. And so that can be the death of any great rock and roll band or any great rock and roll song. But Counting Crows use strings so well, and I think this is a song where they do it, where they kind of come in naturally, and they're just exactly where they should be. And Charlie Gillingham apparently does a lot of the arrangements, so credit to Charlie for his work there too. But yeah, I love this song so much. It's one of my very favorites, and for some reason, when I think of This Desert Life, this is the album I think of. So it doesn't surprise me that that's where they took the title from.
Yeah, thanks, Geoff. And since I also had it number 3, you basically said exactly what I wanted to say. The only 2 things I'll add, one of them being that, along with one other song we didn't get to, I find that it is so original. Like, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I don't know music enough. I don't think I've ever heard a song like this. I don't know if anybody else could have done this. And I'm not talking about the lyrics, yes, but like even Mrs. Potter's, right? Could someone else have written that music besides the Counting Crows? Probably, I think, right? They didn't, but this song, I just think the arrangement and the idea of it is so interesting. It has that and has that like kind of Adam rambling at the end, and someone be like, "What is this?" But it fits in perfectly. And I always get kind of the chills in the line, partly because he mentions the album of "But oh, this desert life, this high life," because it's kind of maybe a negative, pessimistic song on some ways, or mixed, and then he has that like line of optimism or mixed with pessimism, and of course referencing the album. I love it. So thank you, and let's go to Chris, who had it number 7, right in the middle.
Yeah, no negative words to say about this song. I find this song very much twinned for me with All My Friends. I think they're very similar songs in a lot of ways, particularly with the strings and the pacing of the arrangements and the lyrical content. On this listen through, I found myself connecting a little bit more strongly with All My Friends, and I was thinking about, we'll talk there in a second, obviously. I was thinking of the 2 that I feel are so twinned, All My Friends feels a little bit more successful to me, but it's just a smidge. I also picked up this time thinking about the song and my general conception of the song. I always struggle a little bit with, am I rating the song? Am I rating do I incorporate the live performance? Like what exactly am I rating? And I think that end part is something that Adam has perfected live over time. And now going back and listening to it on record, I think he doesn't quite get there. Whereas if you listen to a version of that, live, again, as I haven't played over the years recently, but like now, like he really crushes that end part in a way that I don't think he does on this record. That I think was sort of kind of pulled it down a little bit for me in my conception there. But
Kevin, let's go to you, who had it number 5. So you also thought it was a good song since you had it in your top 5.
Yeah, I kind of towards the top. Literally have a note here that says quintessential This Desert Life song. So I'm right on board with everyone here. I don't know. Everyone, correct me if I'm wrong. I feel like I read somewhere that Adam sang this song upside down to get the vocal take. Can anyone chime in on that? Does that sound familiar?
Not that I know, but something worth.
I think that sounds vaguely familiar.
Yeah, I don't know where. I think that may have been like Anna Begins back in the day, but I love listening to the song, thinking about Dirt's just upside down with dreads hanging on the floor. But I read the lyric of this song. I love the lyrics of this song because I think it is, again, just him coping with this new life of fame. But even reading the lyrics, the line we have begun to change into the worst kind of people, so unkind, is such a biting line to put down on paper. I mean, it's such a a harsh kind of realization with I don't know where he was in his life. I'm not sure who the we is, but anyway, I think the lyrics are just fantastic. And I do love, Geoff, back to your point, like it starts with Ben on the brushes. We've got the acoustic guitar, and then Matt comes in with that bass groove to really take the song off. I love
Yeah, good point, Kevin. Thanks for bringing up that line. I know that maybe this will get featured in a song spotlight in future years, but I do try to note some of the powerful lyrics. And you're absolutely right that we turned into the worst kind of. And yeah, you could say that it's about him and other celebrities, or him and the band, or him and his friends that used to hang out at the Viper Room or whatever, or him and his girlfriend at the time. Yeah, although it's so interesting given what David Lowery told us, though, which was that some of this song and Mrs. Potter's might have been influenced by the fact that this, correct me if I'm wrong, Geoff, that this recording the process took quite a bit of time, and then David would take Adam out to the desert. So yes, it is dealing with fame, and that was recovering, but part of it is also like things he was kind of writing on the spot, maybe 6 months after they started recording the album, and then thinking about hanging out in the desert more or something. Who knows? But fantastic. So Sarah, let's go to you. And I think you had it low on your list, which is fine. Number 10.
Yeah, and this is the first one that, as you guys are talking, I feel like you've convinced me that I should have ranked it higher. Especially Kevin, you mentioning starting with the brushes. I had aspirations of being a drummer in my younger days, so I tend to appreciate good drum parts of songs, and that is a nice drum intro. But I still ranked it low. But sorry to you guys who had it in your top three. I wish I'd ranked it a little higher now.
That's all right. It all ended up in that mid group anyway, so that's fine. So let's now go to the top 5 songs as determined by us, the panel of Counting Crows experts. And here we go. Sometimes I'd love to force the band to list. I mean, Matt kind of did a little bit, right? Matt said, "Oh, from that out," he just randomly said from this album he loved 3 particular songs. I think he mentioned on his. But so let's go. So this one, I would say this is definitely also so the next one is a song that maybe casual fans do not know, but almost any regular Counting Crows listener would put this quite high and loves when they play it in concert, which is St. Robinson's and His Cadillac Dream, which we've mentioned before was spelled incorrectly on the first million pressing of the album or whatever, and then it got fixed later. One person put this particularly high, which is my friend Geoff Harkness. So Geoff, you had it as number 2. So let's start with you. I didn't love it as much as you, but yeah, please.
Yeah, I think this is one of the great standout tracks from the album. Not a whole lot to say other than $1 million chorus, but they're not in a hurry to get around to it, which I think is again the strength. There's a real discipline and almost restraint to what they do with this album that makes it better to me. Very artful lyrics throughout this album, but this is a great example of them. Artful without coming across as like artsy or pretentious. Matt Malley doing the 12-string guitars on this is interesting, but here's Clay Jones, that musician, the bluegrass musician from North Carolina, playing the mandolin on this track. And really, I think that's one of his key contributions to this album, because that's such a signature sound to this song, that mandolin part that he contributes. So a real contribution there. So I don't know, this to me has just always been a standout track. I guess I don't have a lot to say other than from the moment I heard it, this was instantly one of my favorites from This Desert Life.
Thank you, Geoff. The rest of us had it in the middle. I think I guess I'll go next. I had it at number 7. Okay, so a little lower than the middle. I was catching some things, but yeah, I guess compared to like High Life, where even like Kevin, you were mentioning a couple lyrics that really hit in High Life. The lyrics here are a little more whatever, nebulous and vague, and maybe even though I like them a lot, I guess it didn't hit as hard.
Let's be blunt, Eric. I've been listening to the song for a long, long time.
Yep.
I could not tell you what the fuck it's about.
By the way,
I tried. So I was thinking about this because the arrangement is so beautiful. Honestly, what is the song about? That's an open question. If anyone, I would love to hear anyone's interpretation of these lyrics in a coherent way.
And was that you that was asking? I think someone did he answer an interview about who St. Robinson was? I think someone, right, or Geoff, was that mentioned in your book? Somehow I've heard people ask either who Arthur Robinson or what the idea of that is about that. But you're right. I guess in some ways, you're making a good point, Chris. In some ways, maybe this was the first precursor of some of these kind of third person lyrics that come up later and somewhere in the Wonderland, and even now actually a little bit in Butter Miracle, things like Angels of the 14th Street. So yeah, I love the mandolin in here. I think the best use of mandolin outside, maybe actually probably of all their songs, even more than like, for example, in Omaha and whatever. I mean, if you were judging by the last 60 seconds of the song, this is number one. I know for a fact that I have lost hearing power and my ears are not as good as they should be from blasting the last minute of this song in either my car or headphones way louder than is medically safe. I just never get sick of it. It almost makes me cry how good it is. By the way, I'll give a shout out to my sister. This is the song she always wants to hear live. My sister Leslie, she loves this song. And by the way, you were talking about Ohio mentioned in 4 Days. This song gets a shout out when he plays it in Maryland, Virginia, or Chesapeake, because I actually saw them play in the Chesapeake area. But when they play in the DC Metro, this always gets a little, minor thundering applause from the crowd. So and by the way, this is, and if you ever watch it, this is the one part too, especially in that last minute that, Geoff, we'll have to get you on. But one thing that I thought is really kind of nerdy trivia that Adam would probably even get mad that people think about is like who sings the background at certain parts, like certain things that Dan is doing the background vocals in this. But Charlie's the one who does that like kind of extra yelling in the last like 30 seconds. And if you watch him live, you can see him like going, ah, or whatever. So that's all Charlie. Anyway, I have other things to say, but let's go to Chris, you didn't talk about this yet. And you had it number 6, right in the middle.
Well, I feel like I kind of made my main comment as we were talking there. I also, again, the arrangement is beautiful. Is that I'll hit that again. One thing I would note, if anyone hasn't listened to any of the live versions from like 2003, 2004, where they did it acoustic, that is a really, really beautiful arrangement. Particularly talk about that mandolin, and that really brings that out. There's actually, I think, a recording of like the sound check where they were like figuring that out. It was like something where it was like a radio station thing and it was like a sound check party. This is before everyone could just sort of like buy a ticket to the sound check. But of course, people, I remember the not controversy, but some conversation at the time around people going like, showing up and being like, oh, we'll get like kind of like a mini performance. And then what they got was the band like figuring out an acoustic arrangement of St. Robinson's. It's like December 2003. It's like the Warfield run. But it's a super, again, that's beautiful. I think it's a beautiful song. I just wish someone would explain to me what
it means. Sometime we'll get him to do that. And by the way, when I talked about the end, when he sings that part, I think it's only in the last, so what do we say, Adam's about to hit 60 this year, we think that this is it's only in the last couple years that I think he can't do that really high and long stuff at the end. If you go back even 5 years ago, there's concerts of him doing it. I saw him, and maybe he could, but it just might take too much or whatever. I saw him play this live a year and a half ago, and that was restrained and whatever, maybe the next octave lower or whatever. But still great to see that this is still in regular rotation, right? Now, how great is that about the Crows? We said that they play a song like this, kind of a fan favorite, never a single, and they still play it live. Sara, let's go to you, who had this right in the middle, number 6.
Yeah, so now we're in the part of the album, like all the next 6 songs, I love all of them. 3 through 6 were all really close. And I just pulled out my copy of This Desert Life, and proving that I got it early, it has Cadillac misspelled. You can't see that. but it is spelled correctly on the inside and then on the page with the lyrics. So they just didn't catch it on the album itself. Yeah, this is a good song. Like I said, all my top 6 on this album are all songs that I love and listen to regularly.
Thank you so much. Kevin, you had it also right in the middle, number 6.
Not going to take up too much airtime. I completely agree with what everyone said, which is perfect. But yeah, I had it right in the middle. Again, among the other songs on the album, I think that the harmonies are perfect. The lyrics are definitely a precursor, like are in that Horse Dreamers Blues, Palisades Park area, but a little less decipherable, I guess. But I think one of my favorite parts of the song is the fact that the phrase down through which I fell, when he talks about
Oh,
there's
good
a
call.
hole in the ceiling. I
Yep.
think that's just such a funny little English major phrase, which is who he was. So
Yeah, you're exactly right. There are certain. That's right. There are certain. Yeah, I love when you vocalize something that I didn't capture, but there are some lines of his that I was like, geez, I could never think of that. Not that that's the most profound lyric, right? I even think some of the stuff with relationships I could maybe come up with, maybe not in his way, but something like that where it's so, yeah, you get this great visualization, and yeah, maybe his Berkeley education helped him out there. So, okay. So now we're, the final 4 of This Desert Life. And so this will be the other controversial song. And not surprisingly, it's the other kind of single-ish thing, which is Hanging Around. So there are the 2 songs that people that maybe the average fan want to hear live, Hanging Around and Colorblind. And singles or in movies or pseudo singles were also the 2 that had maybe the most variation in the scoring here. So let's go with the person who had this number 1, which would be Sara. Sara, talk about why you love Hanging Around.
This breaks my heart. So I love this song, and I think I have known for many years that this is my favorite Counting Crows song. You can see I have it on my t-shirt here. But it was like, I didn't want to admit that it was my favorite song because it felt disloyal to pick a favorite. And also it's so unlike all of my other favorite Counting Crows songs. It's much more peppy and upbeat. The lyrics aren't really peppy and upbeat, but the melody is. And when I took drum lessons in my younger years, one of the first things I wanted to learn how to play was this song, and specifically that double clap. And to this day, whatever I'm doing, I have to stop and do that double clap when I listen to the song, unless I'm like at work, but then I still tap the desk twice just so that I feel like I'm doing it. But I just love this song. It is a highlight for me when they play it. And I'm sad that it didn't rank higher.
Well, number 4 is pretty good though. Top 4, right? It's not like it's not like some of Geoff's in the past that he was the only one that had it number 1 and everybody else had it number 10 or something like that. So, great. Who else had this high? Well, actually, you might like me. Oh no, Kevin and I both. Yeah, right. The Chris and Geoff, right? Seen it too many times live. So let's go to Kevin. Kevin, you had it number 3.
yeah, Sara, I'm with you on this one. I'm like, I feel so lame because it's the single, but like just putting yourself in the context of the time where Long December was the last song you heard the Crows put out, as a single. You've got Round Here, and then they come out with this boisterous, like rollicking, great time, which I think is just it's who they are as a band. When you see them live, this is just such a great representation of what they bring to the table. I'm gonna go on my little bass island here, but the bass part on this song is like nothing else I think in any other Counting Crows song. You could listen to this song and just pay attention to the bass, and it's an entirely different song. I know that Matt didn't play it, but whomever it was, I can't remember his name, did an incredible job. But like, I urge anyone to just turn the bass up, listen to the song, and you'll just hear a counter melody, which is unbelievable. And also, if you watch this live, you'll see Matt and Millard kind of, especially Matt back in the day, he comes out to the front of the stage because he's soloing in a way. And he's playing it finger style as opposed to picking. Eric, we were talking about that a little bit earlier, but you can see kind of the different stylings. It's like a very like, Motown kind of 60s vibe, which I love. But I was reading an interview, and Adam was saying that Hanging Around was like the Beatles meets R&B, which I think is great. And something that does come to mind when I listen to this song, if you ever listen to Something by the Beatles, Paul McCartney is said to have basically done a bass solo over the whole song because he was like in contention with Harrison at the time. And I think that's what I think of when I hear the song, because the bass is just, it's not the vocal. Oftentimes bass is just a root note, or it's following the vocal, and this is something totally different. So that's why I had it at number 3.
Yeah, thank you. I'm the other one who had it in their top 4, and I was actually surprised as well, because I was like, is this really my 4th favorite? And I think I've grown some more appreciation to it. I don't love them playing it in concert because I've heard it so many times and it always comes out at the same time, and but the album version I love, and it'd be hard pressed for me to skip that. And I also, maybe it's what you said, not only is it fun and rollicky and a single, but I this is an example, and I think some other ones, maybe even Accidentally in Love and Big Yellow, where I forget what David said. Like, was the point here was it just a song that came out, or was the point to kind of make a poppy single? Sometimes I don't really remember or recall. But even though it's not typical Crows, I was like, oh, Crows are so awesome that even when they try to make an upbeat poppy song, they do it in their own way, and it's perfection. And from that, like, fascinating beginning, what's that, Chris, with that sound effect and how it kicks off?
The wong,
and then with the clapping, and then even the lyrics are, even though it's upbeat, there's still a little melancholy in there, right? And kind of self-loathing in there a little bit. And so anyway, maybe I'll say some more later, but I love it. So let's go to you, Chris, since we were just talking to you.
Yeah, no, but I had it down at number 10, and I do realize, again, I think it's a well constructed song. I do think the fact that it's played in an encore has been basically for 20 years straight. I have this theory that the songs a lot of times the songs I like least are the ones that are played as a closer that I don't love, because ultimately what those songs become are an indication the show is about to end, and a song that you would, oh man, it'd be really cool to hear something else, you're not going to get to hear it. And so I like hearing, again, if they play it at a show, it's always a good time. Everyone's having it. It's delightful when they bring the other band up, and it's cool to hear some other singer to kind of take the second verse. But yeah, it's almost sometimes been, and it's interesting, again, picking up the bass, and there are so many interesting things, but at the same time, my ears are almost like fatigued of the song. Like, I don't like take it in that same way. And that's kind of, I think, why it ended up down there. Is the other songs just kind of catch me still in a different way after all these years. But
yeah, and I'll go to Geoff in a second. But even, Kevin, talk about your, like, even the line, but and the way he sneaks it in there is really great about but I'm stuck so tight, weighted by the chains that keep me. And I just think that lyric transition to the chorus, I think, is kind of genius, actually. And anyway, the timing of it, the other, in some ways, I think, and we'll talk about Hard Candy, and I'll make no mistake that I love that album, but this is American Girls is kind of what they tried to do with Hard Candy, similar to the Hanging Around, right? And even their videos, I think, are somewhat similar, with like them Adam hanging around with a bunch of good-looking 20-somethings that are all having a great time being with Adam, and it just works with this song, I think, a lot more than American Girls. Geoff, you didn't talk yet, right? You're the last person to talk about Hanging Around.
Yeah, Sarah's dying over here, listening to our comments as we deride her favorite song. So, a couple of things. First of all, Kevin is absolutely right. That bass line, which we discovered is by Davey Farringer, which we learned as a shocking revelation on the Sullivan Street podcast. That bass line is like, go listen to it, because I hadn't really paid attention to the bass line until you talked about it on the show, and I was like, I need to go listen to this famous bass line. And I was like, oh my God, that bass line is like insane. It is. It's like a whole different musical adventure. It's like a Steely Dan song inside this Counting Crows song. It's very cool. So I absolutely agree that it's worth anyone's time to just go and listen to that bass line. It is worth the trip for sure. Here's what I don't like about Hanging Around, and I've never liked about this song. It always felt calculated to me. It felt like he was, first of all, wrote this song looking for a hit. Dave Lowry said, I heard a single immediately. And so they built it to be that. They put it first on the album because of that. It was the pivot song. And they did manage to pivot the group's sound and image with this song. So it was a very successful pivot. It's their biggest, hit. And so it was a strategic piece of songwriting, and he hit a 10 out of 10. He's done this a number of times, but this is an example of one where he said, I need to do something with this song strategically, and I need this song to take our career in a different direction. I'm going to write a song that achieves that. And he's done this a bunch of times. He did it here. And so it's a very impressive piece of work. But here's what I don't like about it personally. It's dishonest. This song is written about a time that had come long before 1998 when he wrote the lyrics for it. And he sings it from a first person perspective. He says, I'm hanging around. This album, what's so great about this album, we're going to talk about some of these songs, we haven't talked about them, is the maturity and his looking at fame from Kevin mentioned this, from a new perspective, not the up and rising star from the first album, not the guy who had achieved fame and didn't know what to do with it on the second album, but somebody who had come to terms with it, and somebody who had become mature, and somebody who was saying new things about that experience and saying new things about what it was like to be 33. Now I'm 33 and it isn't me. And the album is so deep because of that this song is almost like, I mean, I hate to say it, but it like offended me that because that he wrote it from a first person perspective. It's like, this isn't you. This is a strategy. It's not a song. It's certainly not, to me, never felt heartfelt. It felt like this is a song that maybe maybe he did, maybe he wrote the lyrics, years before when he was living in Berkeley, but it was written about a different time. And this album, to me, what's so great about it is when he's writing about this time and what that experience is like. So that's interesting. Like hanging around.
No, that's interesting.
Every concert.
Yeah, I always thought, it's funny you said that about the, that is, although I never thought about it until now when you said that, and one retort is that he moved to New York shortly after this, right? Like 2 years maybe? I know he moved right before
2002, I think.
Yeah. I think right before Hard Candy. So it's possible that maybe he was getting sick of LA. But I agree with you in a way. I do think he wrote it more, even though it's written from a first person's perspective, I think it's more of for anyone, because actually he was someone that moved around quite a bit when he grew up, right? But anybody who, I think he was putting himself in other people's place who don't kind of grow up or move on when they should. And you're right. It was, the goal to create a single. But for someone who kind of went back to my hometown a little bit too much in my 20s, even just to visit or hang out with I related, plus, of course, the hangover part. But Chris, you had a point
I actually think, though, the one thing I would say is that I don't think it's that exceptional. And we're going to get to another song on this record where he does this, where he is going back historically and talking about a time that is clearly in the past. From a lyrical perspective. Obviously, on another record, Richard Manuel was about something happening in the mid-'80s, essentially. So I think I don't think that's necessarily a problem. I get your point, Geoff, that it's a little bit more of a commercial and maybe intentionally commercial song, which I think, there's something that can feel, again, especially... That's the thing. I think especially sort of set against the rest of this record. I think this is Hanging Around feels a little bit like Kid Things in that it suffers to me in the context of the rest of this record. It feels very out of place in certain ways. It's a great song, but when you're in the context of like up against, again, all my friends in High Life and all these things, you're like, that kind of feels, they don't connect. It feels like it's a beginning and an end. It almost feels like this beginning and Kid Things at the end almost feel like there's bookends of different records sort of as I'm thinking about it, really, I had low the first and the last song because that middle section is so of a piece that they sort of feel off to the side in a weird way.
Although Kevin, I guess you would agree with me that like everything that Chris and Geoff said is right, but there is something about I think the production and arrangements that still does kind of feel this desert life.
I definitely agree with you, Eric, and I think that's where there's two sides of the conversation because
It's like the
and Chris,
poppy version of what they did
yeah,
everywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah.
it is because it doesn't sound like Satellites. It doesn't sound like August. And it's so
Right.
funny because this album, it's almost like living room pop as opposed to like bedroom pop, the phrase that you hear. But you think about like T-Bone Burnett putting them in a circle to play August, and I'm like, yeah, they were just becoming a band then, but this is them as a band. They've toured. They're sitting around in the living room and figuring this out. So I do think, Eric, that like musically, it does fit in with the context of the lyrics.
Yeah, and even though he wanted to create a pop, I mean, Geoff is exactly right. I think he was like, I'm going to make a pop song here or whatever. But but he also tried to do that in Hard Candy, and I don't think this fits in Hard Candy. It wouldn't. I think it doesn't sound like the rest of it. So anyway, let's go to the top three. Now this is. We're still at number 3, which is actually still in that middle section. So, by the way, even though I put St. Robinson as number 5, it actually tied with Hanging Around. So, I don't know. I guess I was the tiebreaker there. Who knows? But number 3 was clearly, and this is very interesting. I mean, there is a clear demarcation between number 2 and number 3. So maybe some of you might be interested. I'm guessing some of you might be able to figure out what number 1 is. But number 3, definitely with that next group, which is I Wish I Was a Girl. Most of us had this fairly high. Kevin did not, but we'll talk about that. There is, for me, and I'm not mad that this is number 3. Clearly, for me, there's been no other song that has moved up the rankings. In fact, I mean, I guess I liked it better than Speedway, but for years, I mean, maybe 10 years, this was one of my least favorite songs on the album, and I couldn't understand why kind of hardcore Crows fans liked it so much. I was like, geez, they don't have great taste for the rest of the album. But it has really sold on me, which is funny because I was trying to say that to David. And if you remember, David said like, it's my least favorite of the group. They were trying to be too much like Sparkle Horse. And I was like, no, I actually think it's great. And he misunderstood because I thought the production could have even been a little better. Or arrangement could have been a little better. I think the arrangement undersold, and I appreciated more after seeing it in concert a couple times. But I won't say anything more right now. Let's go to Sara, who also had this very high. In fact, she's the only one that had it in the top 3. Number 2 for Sara, I Wish I Was a Girl.
Yeah, this is obviously another favorite of mine. I think it sounds a lot different than their other songs, like musically. And I also like that it's kind of a sequel to Goodnight Elizabeth. Mm-hmm. But then also, if you think too deeply about the lyrics, it's also kind of ridiculous.
Yes.
Like, I wish I was a girl so that you would believe that I, as your boyfriend, wasn't cheating on you. So don't think too deeply about it.
Yeah, thank you. And actually, that was one of the things that used to bother me when I didn't. I felt the same thing. By the way, thank you for mentioning about the callback. Now, sometimes I might see callbacks that maybe I look too much into them, but even like for Hanging Around, and by the way, Chris, I looked in 2014 when I saw them, they actually did not play Hanging Around. Although I think they might not have had an opening band then either. I can't remember that, or opening act. I'd have to look at that again. But surprisingly, they didn't play Hanging Around. But in Hanging Around, they also like After the Light is Faded. So to me, that goes back to Daylight Fading, from the previous album. At least I got that call back. Now, whether he meant that to be or not. But yeah, I do agree with you, Sara. I always loved that when he's throws some callbacks to older songs without overdoing it. And this was the one that famously my best friend from high school, he heard this song and he goes, oh boy, like I guess he didn't realize that Adam. Oh, I guess it's because anyway, he was like, boy, that Elizabeth really did a number on him. Like almost like, boy, he still can't get over Elizabeth after all this time, and he's a rock and roll star. He's like, boy, that must have really hurt him. Geoff, let's go to you. You had it number 5. Sorry.
Yeah, and when I first ranked these songs, I just felt I already know my rankings, and I put this as number three. So it slipped a little bit in my rankings as I really listened deeply to the album over these last couple of weeks. But I've always been a huge fan of this song. I also, like Sarah, I love the callback to Elizabeth. The song was written, about Betsy, Elizabeth, aka Betsy, thinking that he was cheating when he's on the road. Um, and I also appreciate the sort of songwriting tradition. This is tied into Mott the Hoople's "I Wish I Was Your Mother," which Adam had seen a performance of that, and I think it did influence his writing of this. And also Prince's "If I Was Your Girlfriend" sort of takes this reversal idea, is if I was your girlfriend, then we'd have a much better understanding. I think there's a songwriting tradition of doing this. And I think Adam knows those songs and intentionally wrote a song in that vein. And I think that's cool. I'll bring in a little fun fact here. Emmy, first of all, on the mandolin, but Chris Seafried is doing that high backup vocal. I wish I was a girl. That sort of distinct high vocal is a guy named Chris Seafried. So who's Chris Seafried? Well, Chris Seafried is the singer guitarist who fronted a band called Joe 90. Joe 90 was a band that Adam Duritz signed to his boutique label, E Pluribus Unum. Joe 90's album Dream This had a single called Drive, and if you pull it up on YouTube, you'll hear that Adam is doing the backup vocals on it. Now, if you listen to the song, it's like this very cool, like pop song, and you're going, I don't hear Adam Duritz on this. Adam's not singing on this. And I was like, maybe he's trying to sound like something, but that's not Adam Duritz. Well, you got to wait till the very end. He comes in at the very end and throws on, and you're like, oh, okay, there's Adam coming in at the very end. But they sort of tacked it on. But it's a cool song. You should listen to it. Joe 90 was one of the bands that played when they all played Hanging Around on the Conan O'Brien show. Joe 90 was on stage with them, so he was one of the, and they toured with the Crows a lot too. Anyway, so a little bit of a history about the song, and also where does that distinct vocal come from? It comes from, as it turns out, the singer of Joe 90.
Yeah, thank you. And I guess it's funny because I talked about how this jumped up so much because I guess in the last couple of years, this is almost like my second favorite song. But in my ranking, I put it number 6. I guess if I just could not put it above, for example, High Life, or even for me, 4 Days, maybe just because of the lasting impact. But the thing I love about this song is I guess I didn't appreciate, and this was my point to David Lowery, that I didn't appreciate how complicated and interesting the arrangements were. I thought it was kind of hidden on the recording, the kind of sonically and the little sound effects they're doing. I also love that drumming at the end when they get into the end part that Jim, I know that he wasn't on the original recording, but he absolutely nails live. But yeah, I've mentioned it before. I'll just mention it one more time. They actually put this on a recording of this on their official Counting Crows video collection. So that's the one that kind of got me to love it. And then I've seen it a couple times live. So anyway, I just think, so Chris, let's go to you.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I had this high too. I had this at number 4. A wonderful song. The arrangement, as someone said, is kind of interesting. I'll just note, by the way, to Geoff's point, Chris Seafried, there's a really interesting, I mentioned it last week, when we were talking about Raining in Baltimore, there's a really interesting performance that was done. It's a trio. It's Adam Duritz, Dave Gibbs, and Chris Seafried. And that's the first time they had played Raining in Baltimore in forever. But that whole performance, it's February of 2008, is a really interesting, because it's so unlike what you normally get to see Adam do. And so to hear a lot of these songs in very different, interesting arrangements, but with Chris Seafried, one of that part of that group. I just picking up another theme we had talking about this song relative to some of the other ones. So the lyrics here, I'm saying this is another song it's about a historical time, but what's really interesting, I think, about this song is that it's both about a historical time and something more current, right? There's a really interesting, if you really try to start breaking down the lyrics, some of it's clearly happening in the past, right? Because he's talking about, the first line, the devil's been dreaming, it tells you I'm not sleeping in my hotel room alone, right? That's a present tense statement, right? Adam's maybe on the phone with her. It's sort of the same time period as Goodnight Elizabeth. But there's other parts of the song that are clearly like the current at the time, or maybe more recent. He wants, hey Elizabeth, I'm doing all right these days. Like which probably a lie given that he's writing this song, but there's this kind of a play with the time, and maybe again talking about the dissociative disorder, and that loss of the temporality of what's going on. But I think in a lot of ways it adds an interesting layer to the song when you realize it's that feeling of how current some of those feelings. Sometimes you it's something in the past, but you realize, oh, actually part of me still feels exactly like I did 5 years ago. But also I'm different. I definitely feel differently about it now. I've moved on. My thoughts about it have changed, but I can also still kind of access that same space. And that kind of is, I think, part of what makes the song really interesting and brings that kind of oomph to it.
Thanks. I think that's a great take, Chris. And when I get to you, Kevin, to talk about it, I guess I was thinking. I mentioned a couple times, like at the end of St. Robinson, I said it's my favorite part. The middle of High Life. There's different songs here where surprisingly, it's not like a regular pop song. Like, oh, I just love the chorus so much. I mean, only Counting Crows can you like, oh, that in 40% in, there's this one part that hits me, and it almost doesn't make sense in some ways. But I thought of your thing of the English major, but the part of you see yourself descending from the building to the ground, and you watch the sky receding, and then you spin to see the traffic. And that part, I can just envision it. And I don't know, that part of and then you're surprised, and then you're weak. That part of the song, for whatever reason, hits me more than anything else. And I think the music matches the lyrics in a way that only Crows can do. Kevin, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I had this one a little bit lower, and again, I love the song, but in the context of the album, I had it down, I think, at 9. But for me, I felt when compared to a song like High Life, which really puts the experimentation of the instrumentation and the arrangement up front, I just felt that I Wish I Was a Girl kind of fell in comparison to that, at least in my point of view. What I do love about the song, I think there's like a slight vocal distortion on Adam. There's some sort of effect there, I think, which, again, I could be wrong. I wasn't in the studio, but that's what I hear, and I love it. And I think the drums are also a little distorted as well at the end, which I do think is some really great, kind of effect instrumentation there. But yeah, that's what I had. I do love that if you go back to some concerts from the 2000s, playing the song live, there's so much energy, especially in the end when Adam is singing. I wish I was doing all right, and there's so much energy in it. That's when I listen to the song, I often go back to some of those live recordings. But yeah, that's what I had.
All right, thanks, Kevin. So now we are in the top 2, and as I've talked about before, there was a clear demarcation between number 2 and I Wish I Was a Girl. So it was pretty, I don't want to say consensus, because actually only 2 of us had both of these in our top 2. But these were the high consensus. Nobody had any of these songs lower than 5. So that's where they really separate themselves. And of course, when I give you number 2, you'll know what number 1 is. And to be honest, though, there was a clear difference between number 1 and number 2 in the ranking. So we'll go with number 2, which I was happy to see. And I was the only one that had this as number 1, although I really could have gone either way, which is All My Friends. I'm glad to hear that other people, because I thought this was going to end up like number 4 or 5, and I was glad to see it number 2. I agree with you, Chris, that it's absolutely a companion piece to High Life. And then later in my listening career, I kind of put 4 Days in there. I don't know why, but I love that middle part of 4 Days, All My Friends and High Life. I put them together, even though clearly All My Friends matches with High Life more. I don't have much to say. I also think I said this about High Life. One of the reasons I had this high, and why, number 1 is I also thought, maybe not as much as High Life, but I also thought this song was the arrangement of it and the song itself, not the lyrics maybe, but although I love the lyrics, was so, I never really heard anything like it. I found it to be very original. And what was it that I think Matt said that this was his favorite song? And I'm not just doing this as a tribute to Matt Malley, although he said it was like a throwback to Baccarat, right? There's something like that he said in his. But I found it to be really original. I think it, to your point, Geoff, and you kind of hinted this, for a band that kind of and even when I talk to Dan quickly, he's almost like, oh, I'm surprised that sometimes I'm surprised that these hardcore Crows fans, and as Chris and I have said so many times on the podcast, it's because a coming of age band for us. For a lot of people, it was our coming of age band, and this song stands out by being coming of age in your 30s compared to 20s, and that in your 30s, it's almost like, what was that show in the 80s, 30 something, right? That the ABC did. But it was a kind of a thought that in your 30s things change because, well, for a lot of reasons, you start to think about, oh, I'm becoming an adult. What am I going to do the rest of my life? This isn't maybe my play period anymore. But also, if you stay single, some people are going to get married. Some people are going to start having kids, and things will never be the same. And maybe that even came out, like Chris, we've talked about how they don't really record in a house anymore. And part of that is because of that transition that you can't go back to your 20s. Geoff, let's hear your take on All My Friends, which you put number 4.
Yeah, and that was a tough number 4 because I really wanted to put it at number 3. And I'm the same way. This song with High Life are almost interchangeable in some way to me. And it was very hard to decide which one should be 3 and which one should be 4. This is definitely one of my favorite songs on the album for sure. I love the hard-earned maturity. This is somebody who's writing from the opposite position of the character, the person he was in Mr. Jones, or the person that he portrays in Hanging Around. This is somebody who's writing from his perspective today of being 33 years old and seeing things differently and seeing things in a new way. And just, I think, always in music, it's where is this music situated in the artist's career? And then where are you in your life when you're receiving it as an audience and as a listener? And so this was a song that was personally meaningful to me at the time. The ebbs and flows, the way that they change time signatures almost effortlessly. I'm not a time signature expert, but it's an amazing piece of music, very musical. And I noticed again at the end of this song that the band is just hitting it. Now, they're not rocking. They're just nailing it at the end. And there's these incredible little sweet piano notes right at the end, and then they fade out, which is probably why this song, and the one thing I dislike about this song, I hate fade outs. Like, I want to hear the end of the song. They kept it tight. They faded it out. But I wanted to hear more. I would have been like Dave Lowry. Let's jam this out for 2 more minutes because I just really do love it. Yeah.
Geoff, I'll just say that I agree with you, but disagree in that it almost, I think back of like Jerry Seinfeld's been in the news recently, and he talks about ending the show, and he also does a tight set. He always wants everyone wanting more all the time, like always, making sure. And I agree with you in that I want more. Like, so I said that St. Robinson is my favorite last minute of any song. There is no doubt that All My Friends is my favorite last 30 seconds. That's another, he just doesn't scream because it's him jamming, so it doesn't hurt my ears as much. But I absolutely love that. I want more. In a way, I think the fade out is brilliant because I want more. And you're absolutely right. That jamming at the end is almost my favorite. And if you've gone to the live version, they do play it. They do jam out more in the live version, so they have fun with it. But I have some more thoughts. But let's go to Kevin. I don't know why I'm going to him, but Kevin put it number 2, so let's go to him.
Yeah, number 2. I completely agree. It's like a lost piece of Counting Crows music history. I'm like, what does the rest of that song sound like in the studio? I would love to hear those last. Hopefully they're 10 minutes. I don't know. But yeah, I just wanted to comment on that. But when I think I mentioned earlier that I had this album, in 2002 on a family vacation, and this was the song that struck me. So this, in so many ways, is extremely meaningful to me. But I think to what we're talking about, this is Dirtz. He's writing as an adult. I mean, it's about his friends moving on in life in ways that he is not. I think I'm literally quoting one of him describing the song in a live show. But what I love about it is that as an adult, I'm coming to this song and I'm like, yeah, I'm looking at some of my friends and my family in life, and there are places where I'm not and places I want to be. And I think it's just so relatable as you get older. And then even when you hear him sing it live, 10 years after they started singing it, he puts himself at 43 and then maybe at 53. I'm not sure, but there's always something so relatable and mature about it, which I think is just beautiful. But a couple of just notes that I wanted to bring in. One was the rocket ride theme, because he also mentions in the atmosphere and he says rocket ride, which I think is really interesting. I'm sure there's a lot to unpack there. But yeah, it's one of my favorites. Tough for it not to be number one.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. One and thanks for reminding me. I just wanted to look at one thing about the lyrics about the rocket ride, and then this almost goes back to Mr. Jones, because the first part I don't think is about that the other people have moved on. It's more about him, about being in his 30s, and where he's like, at 17 I had a better dream. And it's funny because he got his dream of being a rock and roll star, but he's also saying me at 33, where I think it's more about his personality, maybe how he interacts with people or just his views on life. And that has changed. Like, now I'm 33, and I got the rock and roll part. Maybe personality wise, or how I interact with other humans, is not what I envisioned. Maybe I'm more pessimistic, or maybe, he was still drinking a lot then, I think. And so maybe that's part of it too. That's how sometimes what I felt in my 30s, when, and I'm getting a little deep, but if I was drinking a lot, I'd be like, well, I always wanted to have fun, but is that really me that I wanted to do that? I might be reading too deep into this, but one really deep part about his friends moving on, and is that, at least that image of it, is that there's part of me and that thinks, and I think this comes up when people are in their 20s. You know how, like, you'll get people together and maybe some are in a serious relationship, some aren't, maybe some are getting married. And then you kind of have this discussion, well, who wants to get married? And I think men and women both have this discussion. Oh, I don't need to get married. I don't care. I never really want kids. If I do get married, I'm not going to have them. And of course, 2 years later, they have kids. Well, I change, whatever. And even in my 20s, I knew that a lot of those people that say, it's almost like, the stereotype of, like, a woman has I'm never going to date again. I hate men. And then maybe the next week they're dating somebody or whatever. But I always thought I always knew a lot of those people were hypocrites that either weren't honest with themselves or didn't know themselves. Now, I don't think Adam's saying that about his friends or his bandmates, but I think there's a little bit in here that is not just, oh, they've married and had kids. Oh, I'm a little behind. I better start doing that. I think it's a lot of, he knows he's different and that he might never have kids, even though he could. And that is actually what ended up happening. So maybe this even thought about his mental health or whatever. So I could be reading into that a little bit, but I think there's a kind of a deeper thing that he always knew he was a little different. And to this day, right, didn't get married. Now he has a serious girlfriend for the first time ever, which I guess he found in his early 50s. Not to talk about his personal life that much. But anyway, I think that's kind of an undertone there. Let's go to Sara, who had this. Was it number 4? Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I really like the song. And yeah, as you're talking about it and, being in your 30s, and I'm not in my 30s anymore, but, I was in my teens when this came out, so I probably couldn't relate to it in that same way. But yeah, it is taking a more adult perspective and watching your kids get grown-up jobs and watching your friends, do these things and have kids, etc. And maybe you are just different and you're not going to do that. And I like to say that I didn't know myself until I was 30. And so maybe he's taking this perspective, like you said, that he knows he's different. But at age 30, when you say, yeah, I'm someone who's not going to have kids, like when you say that in your 20s, you probably are going to change your mind. But once you get to your 30s, you know yourself well enough that you can say that and mean it.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the last person who didn't comment, Chris. I want to hear your take. And Chris, you had this as number 5.
Number 5. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, a wonderful song. As I said, I think it's one of that top group. Um, First of all, we should talk. Well, the string arrangement here is spectacular. I mean, there's a really good use of the strings on this record. I think going to what Geoff talked about earlier and how things move in and out, the string arrangements are used. I was gonna say tastefully, but I almost think that's like too um not strong enough. Like the string arrangements are used in very unique and thoughtful ways that really accentuate the songs. It's very easy, I think, with strings to do just a lazy arrangement and a swell and oh, this is how we're going to add strings now and it's going to become big and it's going to become this emotional thing. And that's not what they're doing on really any of the songs where they use strings here, right? They're using strings in these very strategic and thoughtful ways to enhance these arrangements that are very off kilter and not, this isn't and I like these songs, but this is not a Snow Patrol song. You know what I mean? To pull in a side thing, right? Where just like, oh, there's a big swell, Although those songs are good too. I'm not nothing against them. I think this is a classic Crows song of like disconnection. I think that's part of why this song kind of keeps resonating, is that from a lyrical perspective, it is, it drives a lot of what Adam talks about in these other songs. And it's a really kind of a classic thing that, and I always do like a song with an age and things that you can update, right? I'm 43 and it isn't me. He did in like 2006. I don't think he did 53. Maybe he'll bring it back with 63. Maybe he'll hit 63. He'll be 63 and it isn't him. But I always kind of like, because it does allow certain things. Interestingly, I'm a big Augustana fan, and I think that's something that Dan Leyes may have picked up, because there's a couple songs, 20 Years and I Still Ain't Over You, where he'll update, the years in the song to try to connect. And he'll do it very frequently. He's very studious about that. But I wonder if he got it from, a song like this from Adam.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, and I agree with everything you said, but just because I kind of wanted to check out the video real quick, which I shouldn't even. It's not even on the official channel. I don't think it looks like somebody else uploaded it 15 years ago, and it only has like 6,000 views. Which we talked about. What Daylight Fading had 1 million views. So, interesting video. And Geoff, I listened to 5 seconds of the last 30 seconds, and I was already like, I want to hear more. And by the way, come on, is Adam? I guess what Van Morrison's always like that, but is he the best like sha na na la 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 guy? At least to me, I love it. Anytime he's doing that, I don't get sick of his la las and nanas and shasha, and he does it there at the end. Okay, so the number one song, which going into that, I kind of thought that this would win before anybody wrote, but I didn't know. Both, a fan favorite. Mrs. Potter's Lullaby. And 3 of you had it number 1. I had it down at number 2, but in my top 2. And Sara had it number 5 because she explained why she liked the other 4 songs a little more. So I don't know, a classic. The only thing I'll say is that is boy, how could this Crows? So as I said, I think compared to some of the other songs on this album, that musically, I guess it comes across as kind of simple, although I think it is more complicated than it first comes across. But how can the Crows make this kind of simple song that kind of rambles on for a long time and has 4 verses and somehow make it genius? And I know that I'm sure a lot of you are going to say, I'm guessing Chris and Geoff for sure, that lyrically this might be his best work. I'm guessing that's what you're going to say, but let's go, Miss Potter. Geoff, let's go to you.
Yeah, well, I do think that it shows off his talent as a lyricist rather than as a vocalist. And I love Adam's singing. He's a singer's singer. But this is really about the lyrics rather than like him dazzling you with his vocal performance, and which shows you that it's the lyrics that mattered the most to him. He just spins off one great line after another in the song. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And I think again, you have a song. It's a more honest account of sort of where his life is. He's describing playing shows and dating movie stars, and but again, this hard-won maturity, and the real key to it is that line about the last king of Hollywood. demonstrating this wisdom, this growth, this different perspective. He gives that little laugh right after it. Gave up my seat at the bar and heads for the door. That perfectly timed. Um, and and then again, another, just spinning off more great lines, lying down beneath the bowl of stars. So he's playing the piano on this, or like driving the piano on this. And I think it really demonstrates his skill on the piano too, because I think the piano does in some ways drive it. The reference to Maria, obviously a nod to the Insiders. And, again, Clay Jones, here he comes again with his Scottie Pippen keyman performance. He does the acoustic guitar on here, and specifically, he comes in right after there's a piece of Maria in every song that I sing. And here comes Clay Jones on the acoustic guitar for the first time. You'll hear it instantly. So listen closely and you'll instantly hear Clay Jones doing a very signature style of guitar for him. And I really think it adds a lot. Dan Vickery may be the unsung hero of the track, because he's got to play this counter lead to Adam's vocal through the whole song. And like, how can you do that over and over again and not just make it boring? So what a performance, what a masterpiece. Obviously, we all love this song. It's such a favorite. It's just one of their absolute best.
Thanks, Geoff. I'm going to go to Kevin next. I don't know why, Kevin. I think you're going to like the line about the ghost of the Tilt-A-Whirl. I'm not sure. I could be wrong about that. But one thing I just want to say about you, Geoff, and Sara mentioned this too, and other people. When one thing again, maybe it's just that an Adam Lover or whatever, but I think that when he does these callbacks, like, I mean, here he flat out says, which we already know, there's a piece of Maria in every song that I sing. Yeah, of course there is. You've mentioned it in a couple songs now. But I think he does it in a way that does not come across as gratuitous or too much. It's just a little bit, and it's so funny because something that's the genius of it. Kevin, let's go to you.
Yeah, I mean, it's just such a fan favorite. It's so perfect. I think it is a song where every single line is so memorable, and also as a fan, just so fun to sing, whether you're in your car or at the show. I think it's fantastic. But this is, again, like back to just them in terms of a maturing band. There's humor in the song, there's honesty, there's heart. It's just a great combination of kind of everything that they're great at. But yeah, Geoff, I agree with you. Vickery's guitar licks, just going back and forth with Adam to make that not boring and just to make it exciting and different every time is wild. I just think, again, it's a 7 minute and 45-second song. Like when we think of those other songs, we've got like American Pie. We have like scenes from an Italian restaurant. And I don't know. I listen to American Pie. I get so bored. Hot take. It's a great song, but I'm like, I don't need to hear it again. Potter's, I'll put it on. It's like it lasts 3 minutes and it's fresh every time. I just love it so long, and I think it's another great brush song. I think Ben's tickling the brushes, as they say.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. It definitely is one of the quickest 8-minute songs I've ever heard, and it's weird because it's not that fast of a song. It just keeps going, and it's weird. Do you and Chris, we'll get to you in a bit, and Sara as well, but. We talked about how what did you, because I'm not a music guy, Geoff, you were talking about like the change of pace of a lot of these songs, like High Life and Amy Hit the Atmosphere and All My Friends. They keep changing. This one doesn't really, right? I mean, a little bit, but for the most part, it just keeps going and going. And you'd think I wouldn't like that, but yeah, it just works so well. And I guess let's just highlight some. You said that because every line is so memorable, but. Only the lovesick rejections that accompany the company I keep, and the razor perceptions that cut just a little too deep. Boy, those lyrics are so great. Sara, let's go to you and get your thoughts on Mrs. Potter's.
I honestly don't know why I had it ranked so low, because lyrically this is one of my favorite songs. I tried to convince my high school English teacher that this was a piece of poetry and we should study it. She was not impressed.
Boo.
Boo, exactly.
But I think if I was analyzing just the lyrics, it would be higher, but I don't know, maybe it's it's kind of long and winding for a song, but also I don't know what part you could cut out and still leave the song as good as it is. But I mean, it is lyrically an amazing song, and I love it, even though I only had it ranked. What did I have it, 5?
Number five, yeah. But but to your point, I think that is kind of what Adam said. He's like, "What am I going to cut out? This is the song. It had to be four verses, whatever." So let's go to Chris Miggs, who had this. Oh, also number one.
Number one.
So this is yeah.
It's number one. This is one of, and this is if you're particularly, I feel like if you're trying to a little bit more objectively rank the Crow's best songs. If you're trying to a little disconnect from just the emotional feelings that, because obviously everyone's going to feel differently, like this has got to kind of be up there because as people have said already, it's 8 minutes that feels like 4. The music, the way the music and the lyrics work together, like lyrically, Adam might blush by saying this. This is on the level of like 60s Dylan, right? This is like he's spitting off verses like this is Desolation Row or something. But oh, by the way, at least as compared to like the recordings, I would argue musically, this is better. This is the superior to not every 60s Dylan song, but this is right. I mean, this is a spectacular piece of music paired with just him just spitting verses of like one-liners that we've gotten into this. No one's referenced if you've never stared off into the distance, then your life is a shame, which is fucking true. If dreams are like movies, then memories are films about ghost, which is such a good line. It's the name of their greatest hits record.
Right.
And even just the first line of the song, right? Like,
yes, that's what I was
woke
going
up
to say.
in mid-afternoon because that's when it all hurts the most. And you're like, if they ever like a truth bomb there, right? And they drop into that, like, and we talked a little about this with Lowry, right? There's this really interesting thing where the party of hanging around seamlessly on the record segues into Adam. Like you can almost hear him retreating from the party, maybe slowly, maybe he's been drinking and he passes out, right? He wakes up. You woke up in mid-afternoon because that's when it all hurts the most. This is what happens after the party. Is this feeling? And it's this whole sort of beautiful train of thought. Like it feels like one train of thought. It's kind of just really insane as a song. I've always also, the one other thing I really love about this song is how ballsy it is, how they've used it in concert, right? Because this is, again, an 8-minute song where regularly they would play an 8-minute Rain King and segue straight into this. And that is such a fucking like belief in your audience or not giving a shit one way or the other. But I think it's belief. I think it's them trusting and going like, we are going to open here with 15 minutes of music before you can take a break. And we're not going to play 2 of the biggest hits, and it's going to work, and it's going to launch the rest of the show. I've always really loved that. From a live version perspective, mostly this has kind of stayed the same, but there's some really interesting versions in 2006 after there'd been a fire up in Joshua Tree where Adam like talks about the palace and, the palace still stands. And I think that's actually also a time period where they started really kind of using visuals pretty strongly in the background of this song live, where they would go like, I head straight for the door and you'd see kind of something that looks like the open road and the night sky, and really kind of taking you there and accentuating, using the visuals to accentuate that. There was a conversation in one of the Crows Facebook group this week about, what would it be like if the Crows played the Sphere? And while that would be really cool from a sound perspective, I'm not totally sure they're the visual band for that. But this, if they could get up there and play one song, I actually think this would kind of be the song. It's such a universe and a world that watching something at the Sphere move through with this song, I actually think would be the call if they got to pick one tune.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I love your take. Love having you in a co-host, Chris. And I like when you bring up stuff like, I never thought of this even though sequentially it is a great, from hanging around to Mrs. Potter, I never thought of it as like after the hanging around party, which that's great. That I will never think of it differently again. How about this? Maybe you've all caught this. It's just because I'm kind of looking at the lyrics while I'm trying to MC this, and both hanging around and Mrs. Potter reference blue light. I had no idea. Didn't
I
catch
hadn't
that
about
before.
that either.
So there you go. We always catch a new thing. How about the line of the swirling dust sparkle jet stream? That to me is genius. And thanks for mentioning about the thing of Joshua Tree, because even though he obviously is very literal, talking about things like Sullivan Street and the bar in Mr. Jones, I actually, given that he was hanging around Hollywood, I thought that was actually and because he does mention dreams a lot. I actually thought about standing up in the palace of Last of the Great Pine. I actually thought that was something just in his imagination, or maybe he saw something in the Midwest once or something like that. No idea that was actually not only a real bar, but the same sleepy town near not too far from LA that actually David Lowery owned a house in. So that's why they were there. Okay. Great. Any other? We will give some parting thoughts to Sara and Kevin before we go. But Geoff and Chris, did you want to say anything else about the album as a whole, or do you think we did a pretty good job covering that?
I think we covered it. I think it's going to be interesting to think about ranking. Someday, maybe we'll need to rank the records.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be interesting to see where this one lands. I feel like the first two are such stone cold classics that they sort of they do tend to stand. But it's interesting, I think, where this one would land for people as a with the part of the career after those first two big records.
Yeah, I think a surprising number would put this as their number one, I think, of fans that really like the first three albums. So let's go to so before we wrap up, we'll just give Sara and Kevin, this is their first time on the podcast, a chance to tell a personal story about them and the Crows. So Sara, let's start with you.
Okay, so as you all probably figured out, I was quite a fan in high school when this album came out. I was in my final year of high school, and somehow a review of this album ended up on the front page of my high school newspaper, of which I was the editor-in-chief and one of the only readers. So clearly there were not enough checks and balance in place. And also, because I went to an extremely small school that only had 5 people in the graduating class, we each got our own page in the yearbook. And so I designed my page, and I think I've emailed it to some of you guys. All of the captions of the photos were Counting Crows quotes, and I had a border going around the edge of the page that was also Counting Crows quotes. And this was quite a feat of design on a computer at the turn of the year 2000. And the editor-in-chief told me it could not be done. And I said, I was able to do it on my personal computer, so surely you can figure out how to do it on your fancy yearbook software. And that page is such a perfect encapsulation of who I was at that time. To this day, I look at it and I am so glad I did it.
What was the centerpiece quote?
There wasn't a centerpiece quote. So I had a few pictures on the page, and here I'll send you a picture, but here's a copy here. So I didn't have a center page. I had 5 photos, and then under each photo there's a quote, and then going around the edge is Counting Crows quotes.
So yeah, there you go. So some people think, after high school you'll change, or you'll think, nope. Here you are. You're still proud of that work. Decades later. So
yeah, I'm sure that most people would look back at a yearbook page that they designed when they were 16, 17 years old and maybe have some regrets about it, but I have no regrets.
Yeah, I mean, my science lab partner senior year got a Red Hot Chili Peppers tattoo, and I've always been wondering if he still loves it or regrets it. I'm not sure. Maybe he's still proud of it. I don't know. Great. Thank you so much, Sara, for sharing. Kevin, let's go to you. Just thoughts or things you wanted to say on Sullivan Street podcast.
Sure. Yeah. I think one like Counting Crows memory or experience that I'll share. I went to the Barn Stormer show in Iowa
Mm.
back in 2012, which is an incredible live video, obviously on YouTube. But drove from Scranton, PA, across the country to Iowa to see that show. Met Adam beforehand. It was on the 4th of July, so I have this ridiculous American flag T-shirt on, and he's like, "Who is this guy who drove from across the country?" But I have to say that was, I mean, as you could tell from the video, just such a special night. And I think, talking to folks that are diehards, there was a point in the show, maybe like an hour and a half, 2 hours in, where Adam's like, "We've got a lot of show left." And I was like, I've been waiting to hear those words, because usually, as you were saying, Chris, it goes to hanging around and you're like, well, shit, I'm not going to hear Speedway tonight. Great. But they played for so long and they played some deep cuts, and it was so memorable and fun. So just wanted to bring up that memory.
Kevin, did you say, and then we'll end with this, that on the last episode where we did an excellent deep dive into daylight fading and raining in Baltimore, one of my comments was that watching the video, now I know the band is different and the number of band members are different. For example, Emmy's now a full-time member. But I said, geez, it really seemed like Matt and Millard play the bass differently, even to sometimes the same songs. And I said Matt more strums and Millard more, what, I don't know what the word you use, point or picks or whatever with one finger. You said you actually had a comment to that because you have played bass before?
Yeah, played a little bass. My comment was, and Eric specifically, because you were talking about the daylight fading video where it looks like Matt is strumming, and bass players will play, they'll do the finger pick, which is one style, or they'll actually use a guitar pick. And oftentimes when using a guitar pick, bass musicians will do that so they could hit the string faster. So if you notice on like Angels of the Silences and Daylight Fading and the faster version of Have You Seen Me Lately, I mean, it's a fast song. So I think Matt is really just, it looks like he's strumming, but he's probably hammering on like the fat E string
Okay.
to keep up in some ways. And again, I think it's more of a stylistic choice. But again, I think even watching Millard, he uses a lot of the finger style, which is pretty popular. If you look at, back in like Motown, and James Jamerson, who's a legendary bassist, will use that to have a little bit more control over the strings. So in some ways it's just preference. But I think that answers the question as to, was Matt, strumming, or, how is he doing it?
Yeah, I didn't know that. And as I said, I think, in some of those earlier songs, Matt was more pronounced, and he would even sometimes come to the front because there were fewer guitars, back then and stuff.
Sure.
But absolutely. So thanks for, yeah, I had no idea.
I wonder if that speaks to a little bit why, I think Millard, I think they've played less of those faster songs, particularly from like RTS. Maybe it doesn't work quite as well. I mean, they've played some of it, but really not a lot relative terms,
No, and when they played, for example, Angels last year, it was the acoustic version, right? So
yeah,
interesting. Thanks so much, Kevin. Hopefully, we'll be able to get Millard on sometime. I'd love to talk to him and talk about his bass playing. So, all right. Well, thank you so much. We've reached what I thought. At one point, I was like, wow, we're going to be done in an hour and a half. And now it's 2.5. So we'll be splitting this into 2 episodes. But hey, 2.5 hours, not, what, of course, it deserves that and much more for such a classic album, This Desert Life.
The bonus material will be all of us collectively doing a dramatic reading of the Mrs. Potter's lyrics, just all the way through.
Exactly. well, yeah. Next episode, we'll do, each of us do our top 7 Mrs. Potter's lyrics, because there's a lot there. Thanks so much, everybody, and we'll see you down next time here on Sullivan Street. Goodbye.